Chapter 1977. Qing Yaojin was stunned. There was nothing wrong with what he said. The bow had just been made. If he pulled it, it would be ruined. Was Feng Zi praising him for his strength or mocking him for ruining the bow? He thought for a moment but did not say anything. However, he agreed with Feng Zi and said, "You're right. With my strength, it will definitely be ruined if I pull it." He then turned to Qing Chumo and glared at him. "Lao Tzu is so strong but you can't even pull the bow. What's the use of you?" As he spoke, he slapped Qing Chumo. The latter screamed in fear but he did not dare to dodge. He could only look at Zhang Feng for help. Zhang Feng naturally knew what was going on. He didn't want to save Iron Bull but he still had to make the bow. He had no choice but to persuade him, "Old Qin, that's enough. It's not Iron Bull's fault that the bow can't be drawn. There are still important things that haven't been installed." Hearing this, Qing Yaojin's interest was piqued. He stopped what he was doing and asked with a smile, "What else do you need to install?" When Zhang Feng saw that Qing Yaojin had stopped moving, he no longer paid attention to him. Instead, he looked at Arjunan and said with a serious face, "Take out 2 thin steel pipes. They must be so long that they can fit between the handle and the bowstring." Arjunan frowned. He had some doubts but he did not plan to say anything. He glanced at the bow and made a rough estimation. Then he turned and left. Qing Yaojin was not satisfied. He asked, "Feng Zi, what are you going to do with the steel pipes?" "You'll know in a moment." Zhang Feng did not plan to explain. He waved his hand impatiently. Then he seemed to think of something and continued, "You can't continue to hit Iron Bull." As soon as he said that, Qing Chumo looked at Zhang Feng as if he was looking at his second parent. If he were a woman, he would have given himself to Zhang Feng. On the other hand, Zhang Sun Chong and the others were not brothers at all. When his father hit him, he didn't even dare to fart. Feng Zi was more reliable. Thinking of this, he looked at Feng Zi with even more passion and gratitude. However, Zhang Feng's next sentence caused him to be taken aback. "If you want to forge Iron Bull, go home and do it slowly. Don't make the forging workshop bleed." "This?" Qing Chumo cried. He originally thought that Feng Zi had found his conscience. She was going to plead for him. In the end, however, this guy was afraid that old Qing would beat him up on the mountain. He wanted to cry but he couldn't. He couldn't help but shift his gaze to this damned old man. Qing Yaojin gave Zhang Feng a knowing look and said with a smile, "I understand. I won't hit him anymore. Let's save some face for this kid first." As soon as he finished speaking, Arjunan also came back. He was holding several steel pipes in his hand. They were of different thicknesses and lengths. "Director, I've brought the things back. How do you think I should use them?" Zhang Feng took one of the steel pipes and carefully examined it. Then he looked at everyone and said, "Old Qing, these 2 steel pipes are tied to the 2 auxiliary bowstrings. The other end is facing the bow handle." Qing Yaojin was a little dumbfounded. Why were there steel pipes tied to the bowstrings? Although these 2 auxiliary bowstrings were not as powerful as the main bowstring, why were there still steel pipes tied to them? This was something that had never happened before. He asked in confusion, "Feng Zi, what are you doing? Why do you need to tie steel pipes to them?" "Increasing pressure." Zhang Feng replied solemnly and looked at the bow and arrow. "Don't think that there are 3 bowstrings. In fact, they all exert force together so the pressure will be gathered together. The purpose of this steel pipe is to disperse the pressure. Then the 3 bowstrings exert force together. The pressure increases and the power increases at the same time." Everyone felt a headache coming on. Especially Qing Yaojin. He didn't know what pressure was at all. He just wanted Feng Zi to explain the use of the steel pipe and whether it was good or not. In the end, this guy talked a lot and didn't seem to intend to stop. This was a headache. He quickly waved his hand. "Stop, stop, stop. Feng Zi, we don't understand what you're saying." "I didn't expect you to understand in the first place." Zhang Feng rolled his eyes at Qing Yaojin. He didn't intend to talk about it but this guy asked. Well then he would talk about it. Moreover, he wasn't talking to old Qing because he knew that this guy wouldn't understand. So he was talking to old Qing. This guy still had a righteous look on his face. Zhang Feng said, "These things are too profound. It's fine if you don't understand. Now let's get to work." After that, he glanced at everyone and finally his eyes fell on Qing Yaojin. He said, "Old Qing, tie these 2 steel pipes to the 2 auxiliary bowstrings. The other end faces the bow handle." Qing Yaojin said, "Oh." He didn't know if it was because he had been taught a lesson or something else. This time he didn't ask any questions and just started working. Soon the steel pipes were fixed. He looked at Zhang Feng. "Feng Zi, what do we do now?" Chapter 1978. Zhang Feng didn't answer. Instead he looked at Arjunan and said seriously, "First apply some cow glue to the end of the bow and fix it. Then take out the horn and stick it on the bow. Apply deer glue to the outer layer, horse glue to the inner layer, and finally rhino glue to fix it." Arjunan nodded and called for Ching Chumo and the others to help. Then he started working. This was a huge project and it was also the last few steps. He couldn't finish it alone. Ching Chumo and the others were happy to help. They all came forward to help. One of them stuck the horn and the other applied the glue. Soon the project was completed. "Dean, it's done. What do we do now?" Arjunan asked Zhang Feng with the bow and arrow. "Let me see." Zhang Feng took the bow and arrow, looked at it, and nodded with satisfaction. "There's no problem. Now we just have to wait for the glue to dry." After that he glanced at everyone. "We still have to continue. Arjunan, you continue to work with old Cheng and Tiniu. Remember to use a different kind of pulley." "Then what are you going to do?" Qing Yaojin couldn't help but ask. "Make arrows." Zhang Feng rolled his eyes at Qing Yaojin. This guy didn't use his brain at all. How could he make arrows without a bow? Qing Yaojin suddenly understood. He smiled and said, "Okay, you go." Zhang Feng snorted and turned to Zhang Sun and Du Go. "You two come with me to make the bow and arrow. Don't worry about anything else." After that he turned and walked out of the cave. Zhang Sun and Du Go looked at each other and followed him out. In fact, the two of them were useless here. Old Cheng and Old Cheng could basically handle it. With Arjunan's help there wouldn't be any problem. Outside the cave, Zhang Feng pointed to a pile of leftover log materials and said to Zhang Sun and the other two, "The two of you, cut all of these wood into long strips, about the size of a pinky finger and the length of an arm. Do you understand?" After he finished speaking he did not receive any response from the two. Zhang Feng turned to look at them. He saw Zhang Sun Chong and Du Go standing there in a daze, not knowing what they were doing. Zhang Feng was a little confused. He pushed the two of them and said, "What are you doing?" Zhang Sun was pulled back to reality with a bitter expression. In fact, when he first came out with Zhang Feng he was very happy. After all, he didn't have to face that demon king Qing Yaojin. It was worth being happy about. But Na Qing thought of sawing wood when he came out. He was instantly unhappy. He wanted to reject Feng Zi but he didn't know what to say, so he just stood there in a daze. It was the same for Du Go. He originally thought that there would be something fun to do, but in the end all he got was to saw wood. One had to know that there were still a bunch of blisters on his hand when he was sawing wood. Now that he had to saw again he was very unwilling. So he looked bitterly at Zhang Feng and begged, "Feng Zi, can you change to someone else? Look at my hand, it's full of blisters." As he spoke he opened his hands and showed them to Zhang Feng. Zhang Sun Chong saw this and hurriedly opened his hands. He said with a bitter face, "Feng Zi, change to someone else. I really can't stand it. You two bastards, I asked you to do some work and you're still here talking about conditions?" Zhang Feng frowned and said with dissatisfaction, "Do you not want the bow and arrow?" Zhang Sun Chong's heart skipped a beat. How could he not want the bow and arrow? It could be said that he wanted it the most. But Feng Zi wanted him to work again. His hands were already blistered. He was a little hesitant and turned to look at Du Go. The latter also looked over. His eyes were very determined, as if he was determined to get it. Zhang Sun Chong sighed and could only say, "All right, let's go." As he spoke he picked up the saw and walked towards the wood. Du Go had already expressed his position just now. Naturally he was unwilling to give up and followed. Zhang Feng sneered in his heart. In fact, he had already guessed that these guys were unwilling to give up. After all, the bow had already been formed. A few arrows shouldn't be difficult. As for those words, it was just to force these guys. Otherwise, with these guys' temperaments, they would definitely not be willing to do it. Sure enough, these guys were working very hard now. Zhang Feng took out a cigarette from his waist and slowly lit it. He casually found a stone stall and sat down, watching the free labor in front of him. After about a quarter of an hour, Zhang Sun Chong ran to Zhang Feng with a bundle of long strips. "Feng Zi, it's done." "Oh." Zhang Feng stepped on the cigarette butt and glanced at the wooden strips. "Put these wooden strips on the fire and light them up. The process of making the bow handle is the same as before." Zhang Sun Chong had a bitter expression on his face. He thought that was it. Who would have thought that he still had to do it? He had no way to refute. He could only pick up the firewood and reenact the scene just now. Fortunately, Du Go was still quite proactive. He had picked up the firewood in advance. The two of them roasted the wooden strips while warming the fire. Needless to say, these two guys were quite efficient. Who knew if they wanted to end this bitter life as soon as possible or if they wanted to get the bow and arrow? They quickly finished roasting some of the wooden strips. They brought them to Zhang Feng and said excitedly, "Fengzi, it's done." Chapter 1979. Zhang Feng looked at the two of them with disdain. "Since you're done, let's go back." The rest of the project had to be completed in the cave because the required materials had not been taken out. The group returned to the cave. As Zhang Feng approached, he saw something shocking. Qing Yaojin and the others had made more than one bow. He counted carefully. There were more than 50 bows in total. The corner of his mouth twitched. He hurriedly said, "Why did you make so many bows?" "Dean," Alkinen stepped forward, feeling wronged. "It was old Qin." "Enough," Zhang Feng interrupted. He then looked at Qing Yaojin and said with some dissatisfaction, "Old Qin, this was all your idea, right?" Judging from Alkinen's reaction, this must have been old Qin's idea. Besides, Alkinen didn't have the guts to do so. They had just started experimenting with the bows. It was useless to make so many. It was impossible that he didn't know. However, Qing Yaojin didn't think so. He was thinking about how to get more bows and arrows and then send them out. Although he didn't know the power of the bows and arrows based on his experience, they definitely wouldn't be bad. Therefore, he made a few more without Fengzi's consent. Alkinen tried to stop him, but how could he stop this devil? In the end, he still wallowed in the mire. He had already prepared the speech for Fengzi's return. Now he began to speak with assurance. "Fengzi, you didn't say how many you were going to make when you left. Besides, making more will only be beneficial. It'll also be beneficial for the experiment later." Zhang Feng was so angry that his face turned red. He didn't know how to say it. This guy's words were somewhat irrefutable. At first glance it sounded quite reasonable. He was about to curse, but he swallowed back the words he wanted to say. He could only say, "Do you know how many materials have been wasted?" "You sigh." As he spoke, he let out a long sigh. He felt like he wanted to say something but stopped. It wasn't because he couldn't say it, but he felt that it was useless no matter how much he said. Moreover, old Cheng's personality was like this. Would he listen to anything you said? Sure enough, Qing Yaojin was still carefree. He put his hand on Zhang Feng's shoulder and said with a smile, "Fengzi, it's just a little more. There's no need for that, no need for that." Zhang Feng shrugged him off with a look of disgust. He didn't want to waste any more time talking to this guy. It would be a waste of saliva anyway. He looked at Arkanon and said, "Go and take out the arrowheads from last time as well as the arrow feathers." After making bows and arrows last time, there were still some arrowheads and other things left over. This time they could be used. Arkanon accepted the order and gave Qing Yaojin a resentful look before leaving. Qing Yaojin played with the bows and arrows as if they were his treasures. He didn't want to put them down. He wasn't afraid that Fengzi would do anything. After all, the bows and arrows had been made. What he needed to do now was to think about how to get them out. Thinking about this, he couldn't help but put on a wretched smile. He looked at Zhang Feng and said, "Fengzi, now that there are so many bows and arrows, what are you going to do?" "What am I going to do?" Zhang Feng was a little confused. It wasn't because of anything else, but because he was confused about why this guy asked this. This obviously had nothing to do with him. Could it be that he wanted a share of the profits? Thinking about this, he deliberately said in a foreign accent, "Then what do you think we should do? After all, there are so many bows and arrows. It's not good to waste them." Qing Yaojin was delighted. He had taken the bait, he had taken the bait. Even though he was delighted, he deliberately put on a calm expression. "How about this? We don't know the effects of the bows and arrows yet. When these bows and arrows are finished, let me try this batch first. What do you think?" Zhang Feng suddenly understood. So this was what this old guy was thinking. He wanted to take some home? This wasn't impossible. He could even promote composite bows. In the future he could mass produce them. Perhaps he could even put them in the military camp. But they hadn't tested them yet. If there were any problems, wouldn't it be a slap in the face? Moreover, this old guy only wanted to benefit from this. He didn't want to give anything. How could this be? He had to at least get some benefits. Thinking about this, he put on a troubled expression. "It's not impossible. It's just that we haven't tested them yet. Let's talk about it after the test. Also, don't you want to take out something?" Qing Yaojin was stunned. He didn't expect this kid to be so stingy. He wasn't even willing to take out a test product? He even wanted to negotiate? He wanted him to take out something? How could this be? After all, the power of the bows hadn't been tested yet. What if he lost money? He was about to refuse when Arjunan came back. He held a pile of arrows and said with a smile, "Dean, I've brought them back." Zhang Feng checked the arrows and other things, then handed them back to Arjunan. With a serious face he said, it's the same as last time. But this time the ends of the arrows need to be fixed with fish glue. Why don't you use beef glue? Will fish gelatin work? Chapter 1980. Qing Yaojin asked. In his opinion, cow gelatin and deer gelatin were much more precious than fish gelatin. They would definitely be more effective. Unexpectedly, Zhang Feng didn't care at all. He sneered, "What do you know? Fish gelatin is the best. It's also the one with the highest adhesion." Qing Yaojin curled his lips and didn't say anything. He couldn't find any other reason to refute. So what if he let Fengzi show off? Anyway, his goal was to get the bow and arrows. Zhang Feng didn't say much. He looked at Arjunan and said, "Start making them now." After that, he looked at Qing Chumo and the others and snorted. "You guys come over and help. Don't just stand there like idiots." Qing Chumo and the others looked at each other, then reluctantly walked over. They took the arrows and other things from Arjunan and started making them. The arrows themselves weren't as difficult as the bows. They just needed to place the feathers and the arrowheads on the ends and fix them with fish gelatin. This process wasn't difficult at all for them who had just made bows. In a short while, Arjunan and Qing Chumo were done. Zhang Feng glanced at the neatly arranged arrows and nodded. "Not bad. Now we just need to wait for the bow and arrows to dry. Let's wait for it." After that, he didn't care about the others' reaction. He found a stool and sat down. He took out a cigarette from his waist and lit it. He slowly smoked. Qing Yaojin looked at Zhang Feng's leisurely face. He rolled his eyes as if he was thinking of something. After a while, he walked up to him with a smile. "Fengzi, what do you think of the matter just now?" "What matter just now?" Zhang Feng took out the cigarette butt and asked. Qing Yaojin's eyes flashed with a trace of dissatisfaction, but he quickly covered it up. With a smile on his face, he said, "Just give me some bows and arrows." "Bows and arrows?" Zhang Feng smiled. So this old guy was still thinking of something? However, this stingy character of his was. He smiled and said awkwardly, "Old Qin, it's not that I don't want to give you anything. It's just that you don't want to give me any compensation. You know, these materials are all provided by me, and these workers are all from my cave." Qing Yaojin felt a headache coming on and wanted to scold Fengzi for being shameless. This material was clearly from his family, so why did it change when it came out of his mouth? Furthermore, he had also contributed quite a lot of manpower. Iron Bull, Buggy, weren't they humans? He suppressed the anger in his heart and said with a smile, "Fengzi, you're not being kind. These glue are all provided by our Qin family. Also, when we were working just now, we did it ourselves." "That's enough." Zhang Feng sneered and said with a little disdain, "Buggy and Debing also contributed a portion of the glue, and these two guys also helped just now. How can you take all of it for yourself?" Hearing this, Zhang Sun and Dugo's eyes lit up. They cast a grateful look at Zhang Feng. In fact, when Qing Yaojin said this, the two of them wanted to stand up and refute. What did he mean by the Qing family providing glue? Did Lao Tzu not provide glue? However, they didn't dare to say this. In the face of this great demon king who ran amok in Chang, and the title of being a playboy obviously didn't work. Fortunately, Fengzi helped them vent their anger. Now they only felt grateful to Fengzi. There was nothing else. However, Zhang Feng obviously didn't notice this. He was still talking with assurance. "Old Qing, you did help a little. At most, I'll give you a bow and arrows later. Your Qin family will give you 2 bows and arrows. That should be enough, right?" "2 bows?" Qing Yaojin was stunned. Lao Tzu wanted all of it. What did you mean by giving Lao Tzu 2 bows? Were you trying to get rid of a beggar? His face was a little ugly. "Fengzi, did we discuss this just now? You'll give me all the bows and arrows?" "Give you all of it?" Zhang Feng's eyes widened. They did discuss this just now, but he didn't agree. Wasn't this guy thinking too much? Now he wanted it? He said with some dissatisfaction, "Old Qin, your appetite is really big. I didn't agree to it just now. Why are you bringing it up now?" Qing Yaojin didn't care and laughed. "You didn't agree to it just now. Aren't I here to discuss it with you now? How about it? It's not impossible to give it to you." Zhang Feng's eyes turned as if he was thinking about something. After a while, he seemed to have thought of something. He smiled and said, "How about this? I can give it to you. However, you have to give me your glue in exchange. 1 tael of glue for a bow. You can make the arrows yourself." He naturally wouldn't give the bow and arrows away so easily. In fact, he already knew what Old Qin was thinking. If he didn't get something, he would feel sorry for himself. Glue was a necessity for making bows and arrows. There was no harm in exchanging some. Qing Yaojin's face was bitter. There wasn't much glue in the house and it was stolen. How could he give it to Fengzi? Moreover, this guy's price was quite high. One tail of glue for a bow. Chapter 1981. How much glue would it take? He looked bitter, but he didn't want to give up. Fengzi, can you make an exception? Your price is a bit high. No. Zhang Feng refused and said righteously, you know how difficult it is to make this thing. I'm just asking you to give me some glue, and you're still so hesitant. If you don't want it, just say it. Qing Yaojin was very unhappy when he heard this. What did he mean by hesitant to give him some glue? This was cow glue, deer glue, and rhinoceros glue. Each of them could be said to be expensive. Who dared to say that it could be taken out casually? If it was someone else who said this, he would definitely go up and slap them. However, this was Zhang Feng and he was a bit scared. He could only suppress the resentment in his heart and said unhappily, Fengzi, it's not like you don't know how expensive this glue is. It's not so easy to get. How about this, you can change it to something else. I'll definitely get it for you. Expensive? Zhang Feng sneered in his heart. Lao Tzu wanted expensive things. He didn't want anything else. Besides, what was the use of anything else besides glue? Glue could be used to make bows and arrows. Even if it was a little inferior, it could still be eaten. It was also good to beautify the two girls. Why should he change it? Thinking about this, he smiled. I'm afraid that won't work. I don't want anything else except glue. Qing Yaojin was stunned. He originally thought that he could have a good talk with this kid. However, this kid was stubborn. Was he going to give up on bows and arrows? That wouldn't do. If such a good thing were to be given to others for free, it would be a big loss. However, Fengzi was stubborn. Was he going to snatch it? That didn't seem to work. There were so many people in the cave. He and Iron Bull might not be a match for them. Besides, Iron Bull was a dog who sided with outsiders. He was simply unreliable. If this matter was reported to the Emperor... The Emperor? If the Emperor made a move, he might be able to persuade this stubborn guy. After making up his mind, he turned to look at Cheng Chumo. Cheng Chumo shuddered and felt uncomfortable all over because he felt that his father's gaze was not good. The last time he looked at him like that was in the warehouse. He did not dare to say anything. At this time, Qing Yaojin was about to speak. He quietly leaned over to Cheng Chumo's ear, but the latter evaded his gaze, seemingly unwilling to listen. He narrowed his eyes and pulled Cheng Chumo's ear, not caring whether the latter was willing or not. He whispered in his ear, "Brat, go out and find His Majesty right now." Looking for the Emperor? Cheng Chumo was stunned. Why do you want to find the Emperor? Could it be that this damned old man was plotting something? He turned his head and asked softly, "Dad, why? Is that what you're asking?" Cheng Yaojin's expression changed. He immediately rewarded Cheng Chumo with a knock on the head and snorted, "You just have to do as I say. Otherwise, when you get home, Lao Tzu will not plead for you." Hearing this, Cheng Chumo's expression changed. He had taken a risk to steal the glue from the warehouse. If old Cheng did not plead for him, then he would be finished when he got back. He quickly said, Okay. I promise you." After saying this, he turned his head and glanced at Zhang Feng. He did not know why his father wanted him to find His Majesty. What was even more puzzling was that his father was acting so sneakily, as if he was afraid that others would find out. Could it be that no one else knew about this? Fengzi was also kept in the dark? Forget it, he could not even protect himself. Thinking this, he turned around and walked towards the entrance of the cave. However, this attracted Zhang Feng's attention. He asked curiously, "Tainyo, where are you going?" Cheng Chumo turned his head and was about to find an excuse to cover it up when Qing Yaojin stepped forward with a smile and said, "Fengzi." Tainyo was afraid that his mother would be worried, so he went home to tell her that he was safe. Since he had already planned to let Tainyo go out, he had already thought of an excuse. However, Zhang Feng did not seem to believe him. He glanced at Cheng Chumo with some doubt, but in the end, he waved his hand and said, "Go ahead. Be careful on the way." In fact, he did not completely believe old Cheng's words because he knew what kind of person he was. He would rather believe Tainyo than old Cheng. Tainyo's constipated expression also made him even more suspicious. However, when he thought about how the father and son could not cause any trouble, he felt relieved. Cheng Chumo saw that Zhang Feng did not have any doubts, so he turned around and left. After all, old Cheng's threat was a little strong, and he had no choice but to obey. Qing Yaojin saw that Zhang Feng was still a little doubtful, so he quickly pulled him by the shoulder and said with a smile, "Ha Fengzi, we should go take a look at the bow and arrow." Zhang Feng nodded and did not think too much about it. He turned around and picked up a bow and arrow to check it. The glue on the surface was all dry. He reached out and pulled the bowstring. It had to be said that the bowstring was very strong. He used all his strength and only pulled it lightly. After confirming that there was no problem, he turned around and glanced at everyone. The bow is fine. Then can we experiment now? Zhang Sun jumped up excitedly. He had been looking forward to it for a long time and couldn't wait to get his hands on it immediately. Chapter 1982. Du Go was also looking at Zhang Feng with a face full of excitement. To be more precise, he was looking at the bow in Zhang Feng's hand. Although he was the weakest among them, his desire to win was no less than the others. Now that the bow had been made, he couldn't wait any longer. Feng Zi, let's go test it out. Zhang Feng nodded and handed the bow to Du Go. Everyone take the bow. We'll go test it out. Okay. Du Go held the bow high, his face full of excitement. Zhang Sun didn't stay idle either. He picked up the bow on the ground and raised it high. Qing Yaojin coldly snorted and picked up a bow. He looked at Zhang Feng with hidden bitterness. He was standing right in front of Zhang Feng, but this brat had given the bow to Du Go. It was obvious that he was looking down on him. When he went out later, he would teach this brat a lesson. As he was thinking, he looked up and saw that Zhang Feng and the others had already picked up their bows and were preparing to leave the cave. He hurriedly said, Feng Zi, wait for old man. The group walked out of the cave. Zhang Feng glanced at the empty space and looked at Arcanon. Same as before. Put up a few signs in front of us and draw them. It's 1 li away. Arcanon nodded and left. It didn't take long for the preparations to be completed. Zhang Feng turned to look at Zhang Sun and the others who were having fun. Don't play with the bow over there. Shoot this. As he spoke, he pointed at the target. This target is similar to Huqiong's target, but it's a bit bigger. It's 1 li away. It's just right for you to practice your archery. 1 li? Qing Yaojin frowned and looked at the target with disdain. What's the point of 1 li? You're setting up a target 3 li away for old man. Back in the day, old man. Stop. Zhang Feng couldn't stand it anymore and said sarcastically, what do you mean back in the day? Old Qin, stop bragging. Others might not know you, but do you think I don't know you? Don't you usually just play with the dog? What? Once we go up the mountain, what's the big deal? He had heard from Iron Bull that Elder Qin usually had nothing to do at home. All he did was play every day. How could he miss the past? Moreover, even if he did, his limbs would have degenerated by now. After all, his body of fat wasn't just for show. Qing Yaojin couldn't sit still after hearing Feng Zi's denial. He glared at Feng Zi and said, Brat, you dare to look down on old man? Let the old man give you a try. As soon as he finished speaking, he pulled out an arrow from the ground and swiftly knocked it on the composite bow. Gritting his teeth, he pulled the bowstring to a full moon and suddenly released it. The arrow shot out like a whirlwind and pierced into the target in the blink of an eye. Zhang Feng was stunned. The scene just now played in his mind like a movie. He had always thought that old Qin was just bragging. He didn't expect this guy to be so powerful. One of them hit the target. He was even King impartial. This was slightly inconceivable. His eyes were wide as he looked in disbelief at Qing Yaojin. Old Qin, how did you do it? This is all a small matter. Qing Yaojin raised his head so that other people could see the hair on his nose. He put on an appearance that he thought was handsome and said, which one of us Guanzhong men doesn't know a bit of riding and shooting? Just 1 li is child's play. Even if our Iron Bull came, there would be no problem. Zhang Feng twisted his lips and was slightly speechless. He had originally wanted to praise this guy and learn from him. Who would have thought that this guy would be so arrogant? Which Guanzhong man didn't know how to ride and shoot? He spoke as though the people of Guanzhong were invincible on horseback. However, these words did not seem to be without reason. The people of Guanzhong had been brave and skilled in battle since ancient times. In the past, when recruiting soldiers, they had to prioritize Guanzhong. The Qin and the Sui were basically like this. Looking at it this way, old Qin seemed to be right. Just as he was thinking, there was another wave of whooshing sounds. Zhang Feng turned his head abruptly because he knew this was the sound of arrows. He saw 2 arrows explode in the air as Zhang Sunchong and Du Go let go of their hands, nailing straight to the target. 10th ring? 10th ring? He found it hard to believe. It was one thing for old Qing to be strong, but what were Zong and De Bing? How could they hit? Were all of Guanzhong really master archers? Or were these people all hiding their abilities? The clown was himself? He stared with wide eyes at Zhang Sunchong and the others. He asked with a face full of suspicion, Zong, De Bing, you two are so strong? Did you take medicine? Speak honestly. He really didn't dare to believe that this former wastrel could hit the target, and was so skilled with the bow. Zhang Sunchong naturally did not know what Zhang Feng was thinking. He thought that this guy worshipped him. Therefore, he put on a pose that he thought was very handsome and took out the aura of a young master. Fengzi, you don't know? Even though I am called a wastrel, but I cannot lose this most basic skill. In the past, my father often taught me riding and shooting, saying that riding and shooting is a basic skill. Originally, I did not want to learn, but seeing other people learn, I also learned. I said too much. This is a small matter, Fengzi, do not mind. Chapter 1983. These words sounded modest, but in fact they were full of showing off and ridicule. How could Zhang Feng not hear it? At this time his face was already red, but there was nothing he could do. They had been practicing since childhood. As for him, there was no way he could compare. But this couldn't go on. Sooner or later he would be laughed to death by these guys. He had to do something to make himself a godly archer. Didn't archery rely on the eyes? Lao Tzu's eyes weren't as good as yours. Could it be that Lao Tzu couldn't make some support? Got it, binoculars? They could shoot now, but it wouldn't work when they were far away. Moreover, there were binoculars now. If Lao Tzu made binoculars, it would be Lao Tzu mocking them. As he was thinking, there was a burst of hurried footsteps not far away. He looked in the direction of the voice and saw Old Li leading Old Master Li and the others over. He hurriedly went up to greet them. Old Master Li, why are you here? To see you. Li Yuan took the lead to speak. Since the last time in Chang'an he hadn't seen Fengzi. This time, when he heard Erlang say that Fengzi was coming, he was happy and followed. As soon as he arrived, he looked up and down at Zhang Feng and said with a smile, I haven't seen you for a few days. You become a lot darker. This was true. Last time on the hot air balloon, Zhang Feng was basked in the sun every day. He was indeed a bit darker. Zhang Feng also knew, so he didn't care. He said with a smile, a little, but I've become stronger. The two looked at each other and smiled like good friends who hadn't seen each other for a long time. But at this time Li Shimin spoke. He looked at Zhang Feng and said with a smile, Fengzi, I heard you made some divine bow. Is it true? Zhang Feng's mouth twitched. He was a bit confused. How did this news come so fast? The bow and arrow had just been made. How did this Lao Li know? It wasn't that he was trying to isolate Old Li, but the speed of the news was a little strange. As he was thinking, he glanced at Li Shimin, intentionally or unintentionally trying to figure out something. But at that moment he saw a familiar face. It was Cheng Chumo, and the latter's gaze was somewhat evasive. Something was obviously going on. In an instant he understood something. So the reason old Chen sent Tainyo out was to send a message. Motherf *Ker, if he wanted Lao Li and the others, he could have just said so. Why did they have to be so sneaky? He wasn't a petty person. If it weren't for Lao Li and the others, Gauda would have taught Tainyo a lesson. After thinking about it, he put on a smile and said, Lao Li, do you want to give it a try? Looks like it's true. Li Shimin's interest was piqued. He was an emperor on horseback and loved bows and weapons. Just now, when he heard Cheng Chumo praise the divine bow, he was still suspicious. Now, after hearing what Fengzi said, there was indeed no problem. He quickly said, Go, let's go see your divine bow. After saying that, he quickly walked towards Qing Yaojin and the others. Li Yuan and the others naturally followed. Zhang Feng did not move. He smiled and looked around at everyone as if he was looking for something. Finally, his pupils shrank as if he had discovered a hunter's prey. He shouted, Wait. Ching Chumo quivered. He knew that Fengzi was calling him. Just now he was preparing to sneak away under this guy's nose, but he didn't know that this guy's eyes were so good that he saw him at a glance. Now that it was not easy to leave, he could only turn his head with a helpless expression and laugh. Fengzi, shut up. Zhang Feng interrupted him and said somewhat angrily, How can you be so heartless? Even if you want to find Lao Li and the others, you can just tell Lao Tzu. Why do you have to be so sneaky? Do you think Lao Tzu doesn't exist? Cheng Chumo originally wanted to quibble, but seeing that even Fengzi had seen through him, he had no choice but to give up the excuse he had prepared. With a helpless expression he said, I didn't want to go. My father forced me, Old Chin? Zhang Feng frowned and turned his head to glance at Old Chin, who was talking to Lao Li. He seemed to understand something. Could it be that this guy called Lao Li because he failed to bargain with him just now? That should be the case. Otherwise there was no other reason. Did he want to rely on this to make him submit? Humph. Thinking about this, he walked towards Qing Yaojin and the others and said with a fake smile, What do you guys think of this bow? Li Shimin raised the bow in his hand and said with a satisfied expression, Not bad, it is indeed a divine bow. But your target is too close. Go, put it further away. Zhang Feng didn't know how to respond to this. He originally thought that old Chen's bow was very powerful. It was indeed powerful to be able to hit the target within a mile. But then he thought that Lao Li was even more powerful. He had to put the target further away. One had to know that 1 li was 500 meters. These guys actually said it so easily. Wasn't this a slap to his face? How could this be? Thinking about this, he waved his hand and said to Algernon, "Add another mile." Chapter 1984. Jin Jinan might have noticed the director's dissatisfaction, so he sneakily moved a few more steps. The distance between them was more than 2 li. Zhang Feng laughed in his heart. "Let's see how you're going to show off now." His face was calm as he said, "It's fine now. Start showing off your archery." Okay. Li Shimin was overjoyed. He had always liked this kind of exciting activity. Even if Jin Jinan increased the distance by 3 li, it would not be a problem. Now it was only 1 li. What was the big deal? It was child's play. As he thought, he knocked the arrow. As he loosened his grip, the sound of the arrow piercing through the air reverberated in his ears. Another arrow hit. Zhang Feng's confidence was completely shattered. Motherf * Ker Lao Li was so powerful. He could hit the target 2 li? And he was not biased? Just as he was doubting himself, another whooshing sound was heard. Qing Yaojin also hit the target as did Li Yuan, but he missed by a bit. This time Zhang Feng was in a bad mood. So they were all experts and he was the only clown? He was a bit annoyed. Why didn't he learn equestrian archery? Otherwise he would not have lost so much face today. Only when he saw Zhang Sun and Du Go both miss the target did he feel a bit better. He seemed to have found some balance. He looked at Zhang Sun and Du Go and comforted them. "Don't worry, you two. Take it slow." Na Qing thought. Zhang Sun's words completely shattered his worldview. My hand just shook a bit. "It's only 2 li. It's not like I can't hit the target." After saying this, he looked at Du Go and said with a determined face, "Come, let's continue." Du Go also seemed to have a telepathic connection. He knocked an arrow and shot it at the target. This time the two were much better than before. Although they did not hit the target completely, they did not miss the target. They hit the 5th ring. Originally this was not a big deal in their hearts, but it was a complete blow to Zhang Feng. He had thought that the two of them were like him, dabblers or something like that. Na Qing did not expect that they could actually hit the target. This was a bit hard to understand. Just as he was doubting himself, he heard Li Shimin's voice. "Fengzi, why don't you come and try? Here, take the bow." Zhang Feng was stunned. He thought of an excuse and was about to reply when Zhang Sun rushed out from the side. He waved the bow in his hand and said with a smile, "Fengzi can't do it. He can't hit the target. You Motherf * Ker can't do it. Your whole family can't do it. You can't hit it. Your whole family can't hit it." Zhang Feng glared at Zhang Sun, his face flushed red. He wanted to slap this talkative guy to death. He was already angry and had nowhere to vent it. Who would have thought that this dog would be so mean? Say that I'm not good enough? Can't hit the target? He was simply courting death. Looking at Zhang Feng's furious appearance, Zhang Sun was a bit confused. He was just telling the truth. He did not know how he had offended this guy. He was even scolded to his face. Who the hell could he find to reason with? In fact, he was also a bit angry. If it were not for His Majesty here, he might have already gone up. It was just inconvenient now. Thus, he could only suppress his anger and ask, "Are you crazy? Why are you scolding me?" "I'm scolding you." Zhang Feng snorted coldly. He did not care about Zhang Sun's reaction. He turned to look at Li Shimin and said proudly, "Isn't it just shooting? I can hit 100% of the time. This is a piece of cake." 100% of the time? Li Shimin frowned. He did not believe it. He was the emperor of horses and could be said to be very proficient in equestrian archery. Even at his peak, he did not dare to say that he could hit 100% of the time. This kid said that he could hit 100% of the time? How was that possible? He was simply bragging. He was not the only one who did not believe it. Qing Yaojin also looked at Zhang Feng with a face full of doubt. He had fought for half of his life and had never seen anyone who could hit 100% of the time. Even ruthless people like Qin Xiong and Li Jing did not dare to say that they could hit 100% of the time. Now, this kid actually said that he could hit 100% of the time? It was simply a joke. He questioned him politely, "Kid, stop bragging. If you have the ability, shoot a few arrows and see. If you can really hit 100% of the time, Lao Tzu will kowtow to you 3 times. The best way to test a person's archery skills was undoubtedly to shoot arrows. He did not believe that Zhang Feng could hit 100% of the time. That was why he dared to say so. However, what he did not expect was that Zhang Feng seemed to be confident. He smiled slightly. "Old Qin, this is what you said. When the time comes, don't go back on your words." As he spoke, he looked at Li Yuan and said with a smile, "I'll have to trouble old Master Li to testify for me. If I can hit 100% of the time, old Qin will have to fulfill his promise." Li Yuan was in a difficult position. He did not know if Feng Zi could hit 100% of the time, nor did he know why Qing Yaojin wanted to make a bet. He wanted to let these two leave it at that. However, when he saw Qing Yaojin smile, it seemed that victory was in his grasp. It was not good to dissuade him. Besides, he also wanted to see if Feng Zi was really so powerful. Thus, he said with a serious face, "Okay, old man will testify for you." As soon as his voice fell, Qing Yaojin could not wait any longer. He urged, Hey. Since there are no more questions, let's start shooting." Chapter 1985. Don't worry. Zhang Feng waved his hand, glanced at everyone and said with a smile, "I do have a way, but not now. I'm going to make something. After I'm done, I guarantee that it'll hit 100% of the time. If you're interested, you can come and take a look." Li Shimin was a little confused. What kind of thing could hit 100% of the time? Wasn't this a joke? However, Feng Zi never seemed to joke about such things. Just as he was about to ask, he saw that Zhang Feng had already walked towards the cave entrance. He hurriedly said, "Feng Zi, wait for me." "Lali, wait." Qing Yaojin stopped Li Shimin and asked a little worriedly, "Do you think what Feng Zi said is true?" He was angry just now, so he made a bet with Feng Zi. Now that he saw that Feng Zi didn't seem to be lying, he was a little flustered. What if he lost? Was he really going to kowtow? Then where would old Cheng's family put their face? Li Shimin also saw Qing Yaojin's worry, but he couldn't do anything. The bet had already been made. Could it be that he had to withdraw it? Therefore he could only comfort him. "Old Qing, since you've already made a bet, why don't you go and see what kind of tricks Feng Zi is playing? I can't do anything if you look for me." After saying that, he ignored Qing Yaojin and walked side by side with Li Yuan into the cave. At this time Qing Chimo walked over. He looked at Qing Yaojin with a serious face. "Dad, don't worry. Feng Zi is just bragging. How can he hit 100% of the time? Even Uncle Qin can't do it. That kid?" With his son's comfort, Qing Yaojin gradually relaxed. However, his heart was still beating. He felt that something was wrong, so he stared at Qing Chimo and said with a serious face, "Kid, if Lao Tzu loses later, you will complete the bet." After saying that, he turned and left, leaving the petrified Qing Chimo standing in place. He didn't expect that comforting his father would end up harming him instead. This is kowtowing. You're not afraid of losing face, but I am. She really knew how to trick her son. Just as he was about to open his mouth to say something, he realized that his damned father had already disappeared. However, at this moment, Zhang Sun and Du Go walked over with malicious smiles on their faces. "Hehe, Iron Bull, don't worry. If Feng Zi can't do it, we'll make him kowtow to you. But if you succeed, you'll have to kowtow to him, haha." After ridiculing Qing Chimo for a while, the two of them left with their arms around each other's shoulders, not giving him the slightest chance to talk back. Qing Chimo wanted to curse, but he didn't know who to curse. He felt that he had been tricked by his father. He couldn't possibly curse his father, right? Therefore he could only walk into the cave with a face full of resentment. He secretly cursed Zhang Feng in his heart to alleviate the resentment in his heart. Inside the cave, Zhang Feng looked at Arjunan and said seriously, "Heat up the resin and melt it. Then make 2 molds. It should be something like this." As he spoke, he pulled out a pen and paper from the side. As he drew, he said, "It should be something like this. Then, find some rubber to hold the resin in place." By the time he finished, the drawing was already done. Arjunan took the drawing and asked curiously, "Dean, what is this called? What is it used for?" "This is called a telescope." Zhang Feng pointed at the drawing and said word by word, "This is the thing I said would help me hit the target." As soon as he finished speaking, Qing Yaojin rushed out. He snatched the drawing from Arjunan's hands and looked at it seriously. However, no matter how he looked at it, he felt that something was wrong. He flipped the drawing over but still couldn't figure out what it was. He could only look at Zhang Feng and ask, "Feng Zi, what is this thing? Is it as magical as you said?" "It is just that magical." Zhang Feng snatched the drawing and handed it to Arjunan. He gestured for him to leave. Then he looked at Qing Yaojin angrily and said, "What? Are you scared now? If you are, you can kowtow in advance." "Scared?" Qing Yaojin's eyes widened. His head was about to hit the sky. He had never known what fear was in his entire life. He played with crickets when he was 3 years old. He brought his dog up the mountain when he was 4 years old. He peeked at widows bathing when he was 5 years old. Now he was saying that he was scared? It was ridiculous. However, looking at Feng Zi's posture just now, it really seemed like it was some kind of treasure. This made him a little uneasy. If he were to fail miserably, it would be embarrassing. That was why he jumped out of the boat. However, he wanted him to say that he was scared. That was impossible. Therefore, he looked at Zhang Feng arrogantly and said, "It is impossible to make Lao Tzu admit defeat unless you really do it." After that, he casually found a stool and sat down as if this matter had nothing to do with him. In fact, he was already doubting the authenticity of Feng Zi's thing. If it was real, then Lao Tzu's Qing family would lose a lot of face. As he thought about it, he kicked Qing Chumo's leg. The latter stumbled. He grabbed his ear and whispered, "Go and find out what Feng Zi said." Chapter 1986. Qing Chumo looked at Qing Yaojin with an aggrieved face. He had been beaten badly by his father and now he was being abused. He felt terrible, but he did not dare to refute. After all, it was related to the face of the Qing family. He could only nod with tears in his eyes and turned around to ask Feng Zi's opinion. Unfortunately, things did not go as he wished. Zhang Feng was talking with Li Shimin, Li Yuan and others at this time, so he had to stand aside and act as a servant. "Feng Zi, I didn't have a good time when I went to your place last time. When do you want to drink again?" Li Shimin looked at Zhang Feng with a smile. Last time at the academy, they were in the mood for drinking, and Yu Shernan and other old men rushed in, which made him feel uncomfortable. In the end, the party ended on a bad note, so until now he was still thinking about how to drink again. Zhang Feng naturally knew what Li Shimin was thinking. After all, the last thing was related to him. His teacher did it for his own good, so he could not say it. Now that Lao Li asked, he could only respond awkwardly, "You can drink whenever you want. I have a lot of good wine." Before Li Shimin could answer, Li Yuan said excitedly, "It's better to do it today than to choose a day." "How about today?" He usually stayed in the palace and his favorite thing was good wine and delicious food. Since he tasted Feng Zi's wine, he felt that the wine in the palace was just so. Now when he heard that he wanted to drink, he was naturally happy. Unexpectedly, his enthusiasm was immediately extinguished. Zhang Feng said with embarrassment, "There is wine, but now we are doing something important. The telescope will be made later. It's not good to leave now. Besides, my teacher is still in the academy." "It makes sense." Li Shimin nodded in agreement. He was not afraid of Yu Shernan and the others, but he felt that the telescope mentioned by Feng Zi was more important. Although it had not been made yet, he would rather believe that it was real because as long as it was real, this thing could be used in the army. In this way, the national power of the Tang Dynasty would be more prosperous. Wasn't this more important than drinking wine? Although Li Yuan wanted to drink wine in his heart, once he heard the two people both verbally refuse, it was not good for him to say anything. He could only spread out his hands. "You guys do as you please." At this moment, Alkinen walked over with some molds. "Dean, the materials are ready. What should we do now?" Zhang Feng took the rubber and resin and looked at them. After confirming that there were no problems, he looked at Arkanon and said seriously, "Next, we need to polish the lens. The lens is still ordinary resin. As long as it is polished accurately, it will be effective." After that, he got up and walked to the side of the furnace. He raised the resin lens and roasted it next to the fire. While roasting it, he said to Arkanon, "Roast the oil on the surface first so that the smoothness and transparency can be guaranteed." Arkanon nodded as if he understood. In fact, he did not understand these things at all. He just felt that whatever the dean did was right and he wanted to follow the dean and learn some wisdom. That was all. After about a quarter of an hour, Zhang Feng took off the resin lens and looked at it in front of his eyes. A smile appeared on his face. Seeing the dean's smile, Arkanon was also happy. He hurriedly asked, "Dean, is it effective?" Zhang Feng handed the lens to Arkanon and said with a smile, "Look at it in front of your eyes." Arkanon took the lens doubtfully and looked at it in front of his eyes. He felt that the things around him were a little bigger than usual, which shocked him. He began to wonder if there was something wrong with his eyes. But when he thought about it, there was nothing wrong with his eyes. Was it because of the lens? With doubts in his mind, he put the lens in front of his eyes again. Sure enough, everything around him was the same as before. Even the dean's head was much bigger. He took off the lens in surprise and said with a trembling voice, "Dean, what is this?" He knew that this must be the dean's masterpiece. Otherwise, no one could create such a miracle. The crowd didn't know what the two were talking about, but they were attracted by Alkinen's puzzled expression. Coupled with the lens in his hand, the crowd couldn't figure out what was going on. They all looked at Zhang Feng, hoping that he would be able to figure out something. However, Zhang Feng just smiled faintly as if it had nothing to do with him. Don't look at me like that, everyone. This is just a processing. It will be better in the future. Arcanon, go and get some fine brushes. Prepare to polish it. Arcanon nodded and handed the lens in his hand to Zhang Feng. Then he turned and left. Everyone was confused. They gathered around Zhang Feng and looked at the lens. They all wanted to know what was going on. Li Shimin was the first to speak. Fengzi, what happened just now? What's so good about this thing? Yes, tell us. Qing Yaojin echoed. He had a vague feeling that something was wrong when he saw Arcanon's expression. Now he wanted to ask for more details. See for yourself if you want to know. Chapter 1987. Zhang Feng handed the lens to Li Shimin and smiled. Put it on your eyes and you'll understand. Li Shimin took the lens with a puzzled expression. He wanted to ask something, but when he saw Feng Zi's confident expression, he held back and put the lens on his eyes. At this moment he felt that the people around him seemed to have grown a lot bigger. Qing Yaojin seemed to have grown 2 heads and Feng Zi became fatter. What was going on? He suddenly took off the lens and asked subconsciously, Feng Zi, what's going on? Zhang Feng smiled and said proudly, this is the power of the lens. I've only used a little now. You'll know in the future. Used a little? Li Shimin was startled. If he could magnify the things around him now, wouldn't it be even more powerful in the future? Could he see more than 10 miles away? Or more than 100 miles away? He was the emperor. His thoughts were jumpy and he thought more than others. Now, it was just a model, but he thought of the possibilities in the future. Qing Yaojin was different. He looked at Li Shimin and Zhang Feng and felt that something was wrong. There were not many things that could make the emperor so serious. Now, looking at the emperor, it was obvious that this thing was very powerful. The bet, he didn't dare to think about it anymore. He quickly said to Li Shimin, let me see the lens. If it were someone else he might have already snatched it. But this was the emperor. Even if they were outside the palace he still didn't dare to go too far. Li Shimin was pulled back to reality by Qing Yaojin's imagination. He didn't say anything and handed the lens over. Qing Yaojin couldn't wait to take the lens and put it on his eyes. With one glance he instantly regretted it. He saw that everything around him had become bigger. Even the things that were usually small had become clearer. There was nothing to be afraid of, but what was scary was that Feng Zi had just said that this was only the first step. Thinking about it, just the first step could achieve such an effect. If the rest of the steps were completed, wouldn't he lose without a doubt? If that was the case, wouldn't this be a sure bet? When he thought of this, he felt bitter in his heart. Lao Tzu was a duke. How could he kowtow and admit defeat because of a bet? If he really couldn't do it, he would have to wait for Iron Bull to do it. In any case, he had already agreed. Thinking of this, he looked at Zhang Feng and said in a fawning tone, Fengzi, when will this thing of yours be done? What happened? Zhang Feng looked at Qing Yaojin in confusion. Just asking. Qing Yaojin chuckled, trying to cover up the awkwardness in his words. Zhang Feng could tell that this guy was trying to get information out of him, but he didn't expose him. He smiled and said, I'm not sure yet, but it should be soon, right? Qing Yaojin smiled awkwardly, turned around and fled. At this moment he wished he could crawl into a mouse hole so that Feng Zi would not be able to find him, lest he mention the bet again. Feng Zi, let me see that thing of yours. Li Yuan walked up. He was usually bored deep in the palace. Now that Feng Zi had made such a novel thing, he couldn't hold it in anymore. Just now he wanted to see this thing, but Erlang gave it to Qing Yaojin, which made him unhappy. Now that Qing Yaojin had left, he came up. For you. Zhang Feng handed the lens to Li Yuan and said with a smile, just put it on your eyes and you can see it. Li Yuan took the lens with a smile. He first played with it in his hand, then put it on his eyes with satisfaction. But at this moment he was stunned. Because he realized that he could see things clearly, and he could see very clearly. What was going on? It turned out that his eyesight was not very good, and he could see things a little blurry. If he was far away he couldn't see things clearly at all. Now that he put this lens on, he could actually see things clearly? How could this not make him excited? The muscles on his face trembled a little. He took off the lens and looked at Zhang Feng with an excited face. Fengzi, this thing of yours is really so amazing, quickly make more for me. Zhang Feng looked at Li Yuan with a puzzled face. Old master, what's wrong with you? It's a little hard to explain to you. Li Yuan's face was red. He didn't know how to explain to Zhang Feng. After thinking for a while he said, let me tell you this, I used to see things a little blurry. If it was far away I couldn't see clearly, but when I put on this lens of yours, it suddenly became better. Presbyopia? Zhang Feng frowned. This was his first reaction. Seeing things blurry and not being able to see clearly at a distance, wasn't this presbyopia? This presbyopia already existed in the Tang Dynasty? He looked at Li Yuan with a curious face. Old Master Li, other than these, do you usually have any other symptoms? Li Yuan frowned as if he was thinking about what this was. After a while he said, usually my eyes are a little sore, swollen, and sometimes I will cry for no reason. Zhang Feng was even more certain about this. This was King presbyopia. No wonder this old Master Li would be different from others when he wore the lens. Chapter 1988. Just as he was thinking, Li Shimin's voice rang out. Feng Zi, since you know about my father's eye problem, then quickly help him. In fact, he knew about Li Yuan's problems, but the imperial physicians in the palace were useless. They had treated him countless times but there was no effect. Now that Feng Zi's lens actually had an effect, he definitely needed the other party's help. Zhang Feng could understand what Li Shimin and his son were saying, so he was naturally happy to help. After all, this resin was not worth much. It was just that the experiment had not been completed yet, so he said, Lao Li, old Master Li, there is no problem with what you said. It's just presbyopia. However, the lens experiment has not been completed yet. After the experiment is successful, I will make a pair of glasses for old Master Li, and it will be completely solved. Presbyopia? Glasses? Li Yuan and Li Shimin looked at each other, a little confused, and asked, what are these things? Zhang Feng forgot a problem. These words were too old, these guys did not understand, so he casually explained, and the two suddenly understood. But at this time, Alkinen came back with the brush. Zhang Feng did not talk much with the others. After all, making a telescope was important, so he casually sat on the stool and began to polish it. Qing Yaojin asked for a rebuff, and it was not good to be thick-skinned and look, so he called Qing Chumo to inquire. At first, Qing Chumo refused, but when he saw that Feng Zi's thing was quite novel, he went over without waiting for his father's outburst. Li Shimin and Li Yuan, the father and son pair, did not need to be said. They had been in the palace all year round, and now that they saw such a powerful thing, they naturally did not want to let it go. Moreover, this thing was related to Li Yuan's eyes, so the two gathered in front of Zhang Feng like curious babies. After about the time it takes to burn a stick of incense, Zhang Feng stopped what he was doing and stretched. It's finally done. Qing Chumo couldn't wait to ask, Fengzi, how is it? He was now looking forward to the result, because he already knew that his damned old man wanted to use him to fulfill the bet. If Feng Zi really succeeded, then he would have to kowtow to Feng Zi. This was something he didn't want to see the most. Therefore he didn't want Feng Zi to succeed. Zhang Feng didn't know about this. He just thought that this guy was curious, so he said angrily, what's the hurry? I haven't read it yet, have I? As he spoke, he picked up the lens and placed it in front of his eyes. The corner of his mouth unconsciously raised into a smile. Obviously the effect this time was better than before. Not only could he see things clearly, but he could also magnify things that were far away. Zhang Feng's smile quickly attracted Li Shimin's attention. He asked curiously, Feng Zi, how was it this time? Come give it a try. Zhang Feng smiled and handed the lens to Li Shimin. Li Shimin couldn't wait to take it. When he put it in front of his eyes and looked at it, he instantly felt uncomfortable. The effect was not just a little bit different from before. It was like the difference between heaven and earth. Now, not only could he see things clearly, but he could also magnify things that were far away. He put down the lens and looked at Zhang Feng in surprise. Fengzi, how did you do this? Zhang Feng raised his head and said proudly, this is just a small trick. The lens hasn't been completed yet. It still needs to be polished. When the two lenses are put together, you will know the effect. Hearing Feng Zi's words, Qing Chumo couldn't help but be curious. He quickly said, can you show it to me? Hearing this, Li Shimin handed the lens to Qing Chumo. Qing Chumo took it and put it in front of his eyes. He knew that something was wrong because he saw a very clear image. Didn't this mean that he had to kowtow? Thinking of this, his face became bitter. He couldn't help but blame his father for tricking his son. He was also angry that Feng Zi had made such a magical thing. However, he couldn't do anything about it. He could only give the lens back to Zhang Feng and smile bitterly. Zhang Feng seemed to have noticed Qing Chumo's abnormality. However, he didn't pity this guy, who asked old Qin to make a bet. It was too late for him to realize his mistake now. He handed the lens back to Arkanon and said seriously, continue to polish it according to my method. Then make 5 more identical lenses. Give them to me when you are done. Arkanon nodded, took the lens and left. He had seen the dean's process and had roughly memorized it. It wouldn't be a problem for him to make some. Zhang Feng naturally believed in Arcanon. After telling him everything, he sat back on the stool as if none of this had anything to do with him. However, everyone's curiosity had been completely aroused. How could they be dismissed by these two sentences? Li Shimin came up to Zhang Feng and said with a smile, "Fengzi, if you succeed, how far can you see?" He had just seen that he could clearly see small things within 5 meters. If he could see further, he might be able to use it in industry or military, which would be beneficial to the Tang Dynasty. Zhang Feng seemed to have seen through Li Shimin's thoughts. He said with a smile, "Lao Li, are you thinking of something?" Chapter 1989. What kind of thoughts could I have? Li Shimin denied it. The item had not been made yet, and its effects were still unknown. Naturally, he could not say what he was thinking. Thus he said, "I'm just curious." "Oh." Zhang Feng nodded as if he understood. He smiled and said, "I don't know how far it can see, but it should be about 2 miles. 2 miles? These 2 words were like a stone thrown into a calm lake, immediately setting off waves of ripples. 2 miles? You're not bragging, are you? What kind of thing can see so far?" Everyone exclaimed. Among them, Qing Yaojin's voice was the loudest. He could not believe it. To be precise, he could not believe it. How could a few pieces of resin be able to see things 2 miles away? If this was not bragging, then what was it? Although he had used the lens to look, he had only seen the things in the cave. How big was the cave? It was only 1 mile in radius. What Fengzi said was 2 miles. This was 1 kilometer. Using just a little bit of resin? This inevitably made him suspicious. "Fengzi, you can't speak without thinking. Otherwise the bet just now will be doubled." This bet had always bothered him. He had been thinking about how to get rid of it. Now that Fengzi had thrown out such a heavy bomb, he did not want to get rid of it anymore. What? Because this was simply impossible to achieve. In his knowledge, even the best soldiers could only barely shoot 2 miles. In other words, they could only see 2 miles. He did not believe that Fengzi, who had never joined the army, could shoot 2 miles with the help of some *T resin. This was simply nonsense. Apart from this bet, he actually had a glimmer of hope that Fengzi could make this thing. It was not that he wanted to count out, but because he had another identity, and that was a soldier. He had to think for the soldiers. If Fengzi's thing was really powerful, then he could get it into the military hospital. In the future, he would not have to worry about not being able to see the enemy's situation clearly. However, when he thought of the bet, he was in a dilemma. On one hand, he hoped that it was true, but on the other hand, he hoped that it was false. He didn't want to lose the bet and even wanted to raise the stakes and take all the treasures in Fengzi's cave. Li Shimin, on the other hand, did not think so much. He really hoped that this thing was real, because as long as it was real, it could be fully applied to industry and military. In this way, the strength of the Tang Dynasty would be further improved, and his father's eyes could be cured. So he asked with a hopeful face, "Fengzi, are you kidding me? Is it true?" Zhang Feng frowned and said with some dissatisfaction, "Do I look like I'm joking with you? Didn't you use it just now? Why don't you believe me?" Li Shimin saw that Zhang Feng was a little dissatisfied and nodded with a smile. "That's not it. It's just a little hard to believe." It was not that he didn't believe Zhang Feng, but that he couldn't believe it. Just now was just a moment ago. How big was this cave? Its radius was less than 1 mile, and it couldn't be compared with 2 miles at all. But when he thought about it, Fengzi had made so many magical things before, such as hot air balloons and so on. This time it didn't seem to be a big deal to make a telescope, so he added, "Fengzi, can you make more of this thing? I want to try it too." As soon as he said that, everyone looked at Zhang Feng. Some of them had never used lenses before, but they had already heard so much about it. Now, if Fengzi could make more of it, they might all have a chance. How could they not be excited? Zhang Feng glanced at the crowd and couldn't help laughing. "What do you think this thing is? Do you think it's easy to do it? First, you need to collect the resin, then you need to polish it and do repeated experiments. This is just the first one. We can talk about it after the experiment is completed." Everyone felt that their enthusiasm had been dispelled, but they didn't feel like giving up because they knew that Fengzi could definitely do it. After about a quarter of an hour, Alkinen came back with several lenses. "Director, the lenses are all polished according to the method you just said. I also brought the rubber mold. What do we do now?" Zhang Feng took the lenses and put 2 pieces together in front of his eyes. When he looked at it, the distant objects were clearly displayed in front of his eyes, and they were magnified a lot. When he looked in other directions, the effect was exactly the same, and it was more than twice as good as before. He put down the lenses with satisfaction and was about to give them to Li Yuan to try, but he saw that Li Yuan's eyes were already wearing the lenses. He smiled. Old Master Li, how is the effect? Li Yuan turned his head and held the lenses with both hands. He looked very funny. He smiled and said, Fengzi, this thing of yours is really good. Is there any way to fix it? It's not the same if you keep holding it like this. Zhang Feng smiled and reached out to take off Li Yuan's lenses. Old Master Li, you'll be tired if you keep holding your hands like this. I'll find a way for you. Give me the lenses first. Li Yuan handed the lenses to Zhang Feng skeptically. Zhang Feng took the lenses and turned to Alkinen. He said, Go find some steel wires to make a bracket that can cover the lenses. The most important thing is to hang it on the ear. As he spoke, he kept gesturing to Alkinen with his hands. Alkinen quickly memorized it and left with the lenses. Chapter 1990. After instructing everyone, Zhang Feng picked up the lens and the rubber mold and prepared to install it. He had ordered Arcanon to make the mold and it fit perfectly with the lens. Once it was put in, it could be used. However, no one had ever seen such a thing before, so they were curious. They all gathered around and asked at once. Fengzi, is this the telescope you were talking about? Why does it look so weird? Is he deliberately mystifying us? Obviously, the last sentence was said by Qing Yaojin. In his heart, he was worried that Fengzi would succeed, but he was also worried that Fengzi would fail. Under these two complicated emotions, he was very conflicted. He even regretted the bet just now. However, the bet had already been made. How could he, a dignified duke, admit his mistake? That was simply impossible. That was why they mocked him in such an eccentric manner. Zhang Feng was not a fool. Naturally, he could tell. He ignored this guy and explained to the others, this is called a telescope. The rubber is just a mold. The lens is the most important part. As long as the lens is installed, it is basically a success. As he spoke, his hands had already started to press the lens into the rubber mold. As he was pressing, he seemed to have thought of something. The corner of his mouth curled up. I suddenly remembered something. Who made a bet with me just now, saying that he would kowtow to me? As soon as he said that, everyone instantly understood. Wasn't he talking about Qing Yaojin? Just now this guy had made a bet with Fengzi. If Fengzi could make something that could shoot a willow leaf from 100 paces away, he would kowtow 3 times. Was he going to settle the score now? Thinking of this, they all looked at Qing Yaojin. Facing the sudden stare, Qing Yaojin felt a little uncomfortable and shivered. He was already feeling guilty, and being stared at like this, he felt even more guilty. However, he had been on the battlefield before, and at this time he couldn't help but calm down. He deliberately coughed lightly to hide his nervousness. Then he said, Isn't it just the bet just now? You haven't made it yet, right? Wait until you can shoot a willow leaf from 100 paces away. After that, he snorted and crossed his arms in front of his chest, putting on an arrogant look as if he was not afraid of Zhang Feng's binoculars at all. In fact, his heart was beating like a drum, and he was secretly praying that it would not succeed. Zhang Feng saw through Qing Yaojin's pretense, but he didn't expose him. He just smiled and said, Wait a minute. I hope someone doesn't go back on his word. Fengzi, don't worry. Li Yuan patted his chest and said with a straight face, If this old man dares to be shameless, old man will break his legs. Don't forget that I am the guarantor. Qing Yaojin's heart skipped a beat as he cursed inwardly. Originally, he thought that if he really lost, he would just have to give Fengzi something as compensation. But now that the emperor had spoken, there was no way he could get away with it. If there was no other way, he could only let Tainyo go. This brat had a good relationship with Fengzi, so he should be able to resolve this. Zhang Feng did not know about the schemes in Qing Yaojin's heart. He thanked Li Yuan and continued to install the binoculars. Everyone's gaze once again gathered on him. After about a quarter of an hour, the binoculars were finally completed. Zhang Feng let out a long breath, picked up the binoculars and tested it in front of his eyes. Sure enough, the effect was much better than before. Not only was it clear, it could also be magnified. The most important thing was that it did not shake. Just now, when he held the 2 lenses in front of his eyes, his hand would always unconsciously shake. Everyone looked at Zhang Feng's strange actions and did not find it strange. After all, they had all seen Fengzi put the lenses into the mold with their own eyes. However, they were all curious. Just how powerful was this binoculars? Thus, Li Shimin asked, Fengzi, what's the difference between this time and before? Zhang Feng was too lazy to answer because he knew that no matter how he described it, it would not be clear. It was better to see it with his own eyes. Therefore, he handed the binoculars to Li Shimin and motioned for him to see for himself. Li Shimin was naturally happy. He took the binoculars and kept exploring. However, just looking at it, it was as if he had opened up a new world. His vision was very clear. It was as if the things in the distance were pulled in front of him. It was completely different from the previous 2 times. If the things in the previous 2 times were magnified by 5 times, then this time it was magnified by 10 times. There was no way to compare. Li Yuan was attracted by Li Shimon's appearance. He quickly reached out and grabbed the binoculars. He also began to imagine in his own world. He had a bit of presbyopia and saw things a bit blurry. However, when he used the binoculars, he instantly felt that his eyes seemed to be better than when he was young. The metal slag in the cave, the rat feces, all of them were clearly seen. Looking at Li Yuan's appearance, Qing Yaojin's heart thumped. Just now he had already tried Feng Zi's lenses and knew the effect. Now, looking at the Emperor's appearance again, could it be that the effect was even better than before? He did not dare to think about it anymore. He quickly stepped forward and said, "Old Master, can you let me see?" Chapter 1991. Li Yuan frowned. He took down the binoculars and glanced at Qing Yaojin. Originally he was still looking at the scenery inside the cave. Who would have thought that this guy would come and ruin things? He originally wanted to scold him, but then he remembered that this guy still had a bet with Feng Zi. If he let this guy look with the binoculars, it might dispel his confidence. Thinking of this, he handed the binoculars to Qing Yaojin. Qing Yaojin couldn't wait to take it. He put it on his eyes and looked. Instantly his whole person became unwell. This mother***, did it really become powerful? Not only could he see clearly in the distance, but it was also a bit blurry. If he took it out of the cave, how far could he see? He didn't dare to imagine because there was still a bet on him. Cheng Chumo saw that his father was stunned in place and knew that there was a problem with the binoculars. He hurriedly went forward and snatched it. He didn't care about his father's reaction, but when he put it on his eyes and looked, he quivered. This was simply a divine tool. No matter how far he could still see clearly. Then wouldn't he lose for sure? Would he have to kowtow to Feng Zi? He didn't dare to think about it. Before he thought that his father would lose, but he didn't expect Feng Zi to be so powerful. Zhang Sunchong didn't know that Cheng Chumo had so many thoughts. He went forward and took the binoculars and do go to study. The two of them were very curious just now, but the things had always been in the hands of Feng Zi and His Majesty. They couldn't get them. Now that they were in Cheng Chumo's hands, they naturally had to take a look. The two of them scrambled and the binoculars finally fell into Zhang Sunchong's hands. When he put it on his eyes, he was dumbfounded because he had never seen such a magical thing. Normally his family was prominent, so he had seen everything. He had even been in a hot air balloon, so there was nothing to be surprised about. But this was different. When he put it on his eyes, he felt like he had an extra pair of eyes. His vision instantly improved, and now he felt that he could be compared with an eagle in the sky. He felt that he could now see the eagle. After that, Dugo also tried the binoculars. His reaction was basically the same as Zhang Sunchong's. He was shocked. How could there be such a thing? It was simply heaven-defying because in his knowledge, resin was a kind of liquid secreted by trees. It could actually be made into such a thing? How could the eyes see things in the distance? Was this really inconceivable? Zhang Feng smiled in the face of everyone's incredulous expression. He knew that the telescope's function had not been fully utilized yet. If they went out, they would be able to see even further. Thus he took the telescope, glanced at everyone and said seriously, "Now let's go out and try. Let's see if we can hit the target 100% of the time." As he spoke, he glanced at Qing Yaojin. Anyone with a discerning eye could see that these words were said for Qing Yaojin to hear. He also understood in his heart, but he did not dare to say more, afraid that he would accidentally say the wrong thing. At that moment, Alkinen walked over with a pair of golden spectacles in his hand. "Dean, the spectacles are ready. I even sewed them with gold thread." Zhang Feng was just about to take the glasses and examine them, but he saw Li Yuan's fiery gaze. He waved his hand, "Give the glasses to old Master Li. Is it okay to confirm that there are no problems?" Algernon nodded to indicate that there was no problem. He then handed the glasses to Li Yuan. Li Yuan took the glasses and looked at them. He looked at the exquisite frame and could not put them down. He was a little confused. "Feng Zi, how do I wear this?" "It's like this." Zhang Feng took the glasses and put them on his face. He demonstrated to Li Yuan and then handed them back. Li Yuan instantly understood and could not wait to put them on. However, the moment he put them on, he felt that his whole person was much more energetic. Not only could he see things clearly, but there seemed to be a temperament added to his body, which made him stretch his waist involuntarily. He glanced at everyone in the cave and felt that his whole eyes were much clearer. However, what puzzled him was that the glasses seemed to be a little yellow. He did not like this color, so he said to Zhang Feng, "Fengzi, these glasses are a little yellow. Can you change the color?" This. Zhang Feng's mouth twitched. He was a little embarrassed. The resin itself was yellow. It was good enough that it could be made into glasses. How could he be picky? But what old Master Li said was not unreasonable. Yellow did not look good. How could he change the color? As he was thinking, he inadvertently saw the ink on the table. Suddenly, he had an idea and said with a smile, "Old Master Li, I have an idea. Give me the glasses." Li Yuan originally thought that there was no way to let it go. When he heard this, he immediately took off the glasses and handed them to Zhang Feng. Zhang Feng took the glasses and used his right hand to pick up the ink pen and smear it on the glasses. In a moment, the dark yellow lenses turned black. Zhang Feng handed the glasses to Li Yuan. Li Yuan did not reach out to take them. Instead, he was a little confused. Why were the glasses full of ink? How could he take them? And what he could not figure out the most was why did Fengzi smear ink on the glasses? Was this not nonsense? How did a good pair of glasses turn into a pair of black and dirty things? Chapter 1992. He looked at Zhang Feng with a puzzled face and asked, "Fengzi, what are you doing? Why did you smear ink on the glasses?" Zhang Feng chuckled and handed the glasses to Li Yuan. "You'll know once you try it." Li Yuan took the glasses with a curious face and played with them in his hand for a moment. Other than finding that the lenses were blackened by ink, he didn't find anything special. He wanted to ask Fengzi again, but when he saw Fengzi's confident expression, he couldn't open his mouth. Driven by curiosity, he still put on the glasses. The moment he put on the glasses, he instantly felt that everything around him had changed. It was as if everything had turned black, as if a mysterious veil had been draped over him. This feeling was very wonderful, making his eyes light up. Not only that, wearing the glasses also gave him a feeling of looking down on the world, as if everything around him had to submit. This was an indescribable feeling. He reluctantly took off the glasses and looked at Zhang Feng with a surprised face. "Fengzi, how did you do it?" If he could make a few more of such a magical thing, it would be a blessing. Zhang Feng smiled. "I just used ink to dye the color, nothing else." The others were a little confused. They didn't know the effect of the glasses, nor did they know the strange conversation between the two, but they were sure of one thing, and that was that the glasses were very powerful, at least not inferior to the binoculars. Their hearts were burning with passion, and they all wanted to try the effect of the glasses, but the glasses were in Li Yuan's hands and they didn't dare to touch it. The group of people came out of the cave. Li Shimin and the others had already lined up, holding bows and arrows in their hands, eager to try. Qing Yaojin stared at Zhang Feng, asking Zhang Feng to complete the bet just now. Zhang Feng was naturally not afraid. He had made the binoculars, so why would he be afraid of this? He held the bow and arrow in his hand, and under Qing Yaojin's eyes almost popped out. He didn't believe that Zhang Feng could shoot arrows. Looking at this guy's small body plus this distance, how was it possible? But this scene still slapped his face and he instantly felt his face turn red. Just as he was looking for a chance to slip away, Zhang Feng said, "Old Qing, did you forget the bet just now?" Qing Yaojin's body shook. He was preparing to slip away because of the bet just now. How could he expect this kid to stop him at this time? Wasn't this deliberately making things difficult for him? But thinking about the bet just now, he became discouraged. After all, he was the one who wanted to make the bet. But he couldn't kowtow, right? Thinking about it, he shifted his gaze to Cheng Chumo. Cheng Chumo actually already knew what this damn father was thinking, but when he was looked at like this, he still felt a chill down his spine. He wanted to refuse, but when he thought of his father's inhumane means, he endured it and could only obediently kowtow to Zhang Feng. Zhang Feng naturally didn't want to. Old Qing was the one who made the bet, so why did he ask his son to do it? Qing Yaojin saw that Zhang Feng didn't want to, and instantly became anxious. As a duke, even if he lost the bet, he couldn't kowtow. It was understandable for his son to do it, but now Fengzi didn't want to? What should he do? Just as he was anxious, he inadvertently saw Li Shimin, who was shooting arrows. He had an idea and hurriedly asked Li Shimin to intercede on Zhang Feng's behalf. Li Shimin naturally knew all of this. At the same time, he also understood Old Cheng's difficulties, so he asked Zhang Feng to intercede. Zhang Feng wasn't an unreasonable person. When he saw that Lao Li had come to intercede, not only did he not need to kowtow, but he also didn't care about the previous matter with Old Cheng. However, he still needed to send the beef glue, fish glue and other things up the mountain. Qing Yaojin didn't agree at first. How could there be such things as beef glue at home? Besides, he was almost discovered by the tigress when he stole things last time. How could he dare to go again? However, when he thought about it, if this guy mentioned the bet again, he still agreed. After a while, Zhang Feng was in a good mood. His archery skills had also greatly improved. He called everyone to continue practicing. Li Shimin was needless to say. He had been a master archer since he was young. Naturally, his arrows didn't miss. Qing Yaojin wasn't bad either. He could get the 10th ring every time. However, Zhang Sun, Chong and Dugo couldn't do it. Once the distance was far, they couldn't even shoot a single arrow. Especially Cheng Chumo, he couldn't even shoot a single arrow. This made Qing Yaojin very angry. He went up and gave him a violent beating. It felt like he wanted to vent all his anger on this guy. He beat Cheng Chumo until he was a little doubtful about life. Li Yuan originally wanted to practice archery, but once the distance was far, he was a little weak. In addition, he had just gotten the glasses, so his mind was not on the bow at all. Therefore, he wore the glasses and showed off everywhere. No one dared to say anything, so they could only agree. While showing off, he actually walked down the forging workshop and unknowingly walked to the academy. Just as he was about to go to the academy to look for Yu Shernan and the others to show off, a white-bearded old man walked towards him. Who else could it be but Sun Simiao? Li Yuan quickly stepped forward and deliberately pushed up his glasses. He said with a proud face, "Old Sun, where are you going?" Chapter 1993. Old Sun? Sun Simiao frowned, obviously a little unhappy. Because in the entire Tang Dynasty, there were not many people who dared to talk to him like this, except for the Emperor. The Emperor? This voice sounded a bit like him. He raised his head and glanced. It felt a bit different. This person was wearing a strange thing on his eyes, which had already covered half of his face. However, this expression was very similar. He asked uncertainly, "Are you Old Master Li?" Outside he called the Emperor like this. First, it was to ensure safety, and second, it was to deceive people. Li Yuan took off his glasses and smiled. "If it's not me, who else can it be?" Only then did Sun Simiao see clearly. It was really the Emperor, but why was the Emperor wearing a strange thing? He asked puzzledly, "Old Master Li, what are you wearing?" Hearing Sun Simiao's question, Li Yuan instantly felt that he was a bit more pretentious. He raised his eyebrows and raised the glasses in his hand. "This is a good thing. Wearing it can cure my blurry eyes." "Wait," Sun Simiao immediately interrupted. He looked at Li Yuan solemnly and said word by word, "What did you say just now? What can it cure?" He was the chief imperial doctor of the palace. Li Yuan's presbyopia was treated by him. He didn't know how many medicines he had taken, but there was no effect at all. Now he actually said that such an unknown thing could cure presbyopia. Wasn't this slapping his own imperial doctor's face? The most important thing was that he had studied medical books for many years and knew that there was no way to cure presbyopia. Now that the Emperor was holding this thing, he was undoubtedly deceived. He absolutely couldn't tolerate this kind of thing. Moreover, he himself had presbyopia. He hadn't cured it for so many years. Could such a thing have an effect? He could basically be sure now that the Emperor was deceived. Li Yuan didn't know that Sun Simiao had calculated him in just a few seconds. He still said with a proud face, "This thing is called glasses. It's made by Fengzi." "Fengzi?" Sun Simiao almost exclaimed. He had always regarded Fengzi as a nephew of the student generation. He didn't expect this guy to deceive the Emperor. He was angry. Fengzi, this guy actually came out to deceive people. Doesn't he know that presbyopia can't be cured? The more he said, the angrier he became. He waved his sleeve and turned to leave. Li Yuan was a little confused. He had come to share with you out of goodwill. Why did he suddenly have to leave? And he even scolded Fengzi? He hurriedly stepped forward and blocked Sun Simiao. "Old Sun, what are you doing?" "Umph." Sun Simiao waved his sleeves and said angrily, "Find Yu Shernan. Let him see that his disciple actually came out to deceive people." As he spoke, he actually wanted to leave again. Fortunately, Li Yuan's eyes were sharp and his hands were fast. He grabbed Sun Simiao and hurriedly said, "Fengzi didn't lie to me. These eyes really have an effect. It can treat blurry eyes." After he finished speaking, he handed the glasses to Sun Simiao, wanting this guy to try it. However, Sun Simiao did not take over. Instead, he frowned as he vaguely felt that something was wrong. Because he knew that the Emperor didn't need to lie to him, and he wouldn't lie to him. Moreover, he looked so serious that it didn't seem like he was faking it. Now that he thought about it, it might be true. After all, Fengzi had once done so many inconceivable things. Thinking about it, he half believed and half doubtfully took the glasses and looked at Li Yuan. "How do I use this?" Li Yuan made a hand gesture and said with a smile, "Just wear it on your eyes like this." Sun Simiao frowned. Even though he still had some doubts in his heart, his hands were no longer listening to his orders. He put it on his eyes as if he was possessed by gods and demons. However, at this moment he felt that his eyes seemed to have cleared up quite a bit. It was as if he could see things more clearly. He suddenly turned his head and looked into the distance. He actually discovered that the places that he couldn't see clearly before were now so clear? How was this possible? His heart shook. He pulled off the glasses and carefully observed them in his hand, hoping to find a clue. Yet at this moment, Li Yuan opened his mouth and looked at Sun Simiao with a mocking expression. How is it? Do you believe me now? Sun Simiao didn't answer. He only nodded his head heavily. At this moment he was already immersed in the magic of the glasses. How could he have the leisure to answer Li Yuan's boring question? After looking for a while he suddenly raised his head. As if he remembered something important, he hurriedly said, "You said that this thing was made by Fengzi?" "That's right." Li Yuan nodded and said with a smile, "Fengzi made it just now. It seems to have used some resin." "Where is Fengzi?" Without waiting for Li Yuan to finish speaking, Sun Simiao anxiously interrupted. This thing had a very good effect on dazzling eyes. It could be said to be a miracle in the history of medicine. Now that he knew that it was made by Fengzi, how could he let it go? Moreover, he had already used it himself. If he made more, wouldn't the old man with dazzling eyes in the Tang Dynasty be saved? Li Yuan didn't know about this. He casually replied, "Fengzi is in the forging workshop." "What's wrong?" "Forging workshop?" Sun Simiao murmured and turned to walk towards the forging workshop. Chapter 1994. What are you going to do? Li Yuan was puzzled and asked behind him. Fengzi's glasses have a miraculous effect. I want to ask him how he made it. Sun Simiao turned his head and said as he walked. He just wanted to see Fengzi as soon as possible. Other things had nothing to do with him. Hearing this, Li Yuan also roughly understood the importance of this matter. He put on his glasses and followed without saying a word. At the same time on Chang'an Street, a carriage galloped on the street. The coachman waved the long whip in his hand as if he didn't feel sorry for the galloping horse at all. Every whip hit the horse's body. The horse kept neighing, but it didn't dare to stop. The surrounding vendors were overturned by the horse's hooves, raising a burst of dust, causing the surrounding people to stop and curse. Mother Ker, do you know how to ride a horse? Are you in a hurry to be reincarnated? What the hell? This is Chang'an Street. How can these crazy people come in? Everyone stop. Looking at the carriage, it doesn't look like it's from the capital. It's a bit like Jiangnan. Maybe it's an official's family. We can't afford to offend them. Let's pack up. What do you mean we can't afford to offend them? This is the Mother Ker's foot. It's the place where the law is enforced. The crowd clamored for a while, but they couldn't do anything because they could see that the person on the carriage was not an ordinary person. What the person said just now was a bit reasonable. The carriage was printed with Jiangnan patterns. It was even more not something that ordinary people like them could afford to offend. The sound of complaints and curses gradually passed. They each cleaned up their vendors. But at this moment a crisp sound came. Dang, dang, dang. They were all businessmen and had a keen sense of smell. Naturally they could detect what it was. They immediately exclaimed, "Copper coins, copper coins." As soon as the exclamation sounded, the people who were cleaning up the vendors looked sideways. They saw hundreds of copper coins being thrown at them. It was none other than the carriage just now. Seeing this, the crowd stopped cursing and picked up the copper coins. What's more, they kept praising the person on the carriage. This was not because they were greedy for wealth, but because the copper wires that were thrown by the carriage were something they couldn't earn in a day. Although the carriage knocked over their vendors, it also left money so that their day's hard work would not be in vain. Of course, the people in the carriage didn't know about this. At this moment, the carriage had already rushed to another street and turned in another direction. Its speed was so fast that it made people speechless. Fortunately, there were not many pedestrians on this street. Otherwise, copper coins might be scattered everywhere. Huff! The coachman reined in the horse and stopped in front of a manor. He raised his head and glanced at the signboard. There were two big words written on it, Zhang Manor. "We're here." The coachman glanced at the carriage and said in a deep voice. There was no reply from within the carriage, only a series of coughs. A moment later, a middle-aged man, supported by another man, poked his head out. He took a deep look at the plaque but didn't say anything. He only covered his mouth and coughed heavily twice. If Zhang Feng was here, he would definitely recognize that this was the little brother he had sent to follow Huan Yan. He was supposed to protect Yu Yuer with Huan Yan in Jiangnan. But the situation in Jiangnan was too serious. It had completely exceeded Master's expectations. Many young masters of the clans had coveted Yu for a long time and frequently harassed her. Some were even ready to propose marriage. Yu was also a heroine. Not only did she not agree, but she also mediated among them. However, how could these clans give up so easily? One had to know that the Yu family had some power in Jiangnan. Although these young masters of the clans were after Yu's beauty, they wanted to rope her family in or even annex it. The current situation in Jiangnan and the Yu family situation had reached a precarious point. As for himself, he had been beaten by the young masters of the clans because he helped Yu and had not recovered yet. Thinking of this, he was annoyed. Why couldn't he complete Master's task? Why did he have to come back to find Master? He punched the carriage and said coldly, "Let's go and see Master." With that, he lifted his trembling right leg and was about to get off the carriage. Fortunately, the man beside him quickly supported him. Otherwise he might have fallen. As soon as they reached the gate of Zhang Mansion, the two servants raised their vigilance. They frowned, looked at each other and said in unison, "Who is it?" Huan Yin glanced at the servant. He wasn't surprised that these two didn't recognize him because very few people knew when he left, so he didn't blame them. He said softly, "I'm also from the Zhang residence. I'm here to find Master." Zhang Mansion? The leader of the servants frowned slightly. In his memory he had never seen this person. Or it could be said that there were too many people in Zhang Mansion and he had long forgotten. However, this person said that he was looking for Master. It seemed that he was very familiar with Zhang Mansion. He could let him in, but Master was not here now. He hesitated for a moment and said softly, "Master is not here. You can come again later." "Then I'll have to trouble you to inform Du Ziting." Chapter 1995. Huan Yin still looked amiable. Zhang Mansion was his home, so these people were naturally his family. Naturally, they couldn't be compared with those guys in Jiangnan. Seeing that Huan Yin could call out the housekeeper's name, the servant hesitated. Because the housekeeper was famous in Chang, and everyone had heard of him, so it was not strange that he could say his name. However, it was rare to see someone as calm as him. Maybe he was a relative or a good friend of the housekeeper. After thinking for a while, the servant winked at another person, and that person ran out of Zhang Mansion. In less than a moment, Du Ziting strode out. Seeing that it was Huan Yin, his face changed and he hurried forward. "Why are you here?" He knew that Huan Yin was sent to Jiangnan by Master to protect Yu. He would never come back without orders. Why did he suddenly appear at the gate of Zhang Mansion? Did something happen? Huan Yin didn't answer. Instead, he took Du Ziting's hand and said solemnly, "Let's go inside and talk." Du Ziting frowned and faintly felt that something was wrong. However, he knew that there was no way to talk here, so he led Huan Yin to the hall. However, he soon found that Huan Yin seemed to have something wrong with his body. He kept coughing and asked several times, but Huan Yin didn't answer. In the hall, Du Ziting looked at Huan Yin with a serious face. "What's going on? Why did you come back from Jiangnan? And why do you keep coughing? Where's Master?" Huan Yin didn't answer directly but asked Zhang Feng. In his opinion, Master must be informed of this matter first, and only Master could calm it down. "Master is in Shao Mountain." Du Ziting was straightforward. He knew that Huan Yin must have something to tell Master. Shao Mountain? Huan Yin turned his head and glanced in the direction of Shao Mountain. Finally, he looked at Du Ziting and said anxiously, "Send someone to Shao Mountain immediately and tell Master that something happened in Jiangnan. Ask him to go down the mountain immediately. There can be no delay." Du Ziting wanted to ask Huan Yin more, but seeing that he was so anxious, he didn't say anything and turned to walk out of the door. At the same time, in the forging workshop, Zhang Feng was currently communicating with Sun Simiao about the effects of the glasses. This old man originally didn't believe that there was such a magical thing, but now, when he looked at the binoculars, he was immediately shocked. "Fengzi, can you get some for old man?" Sun Simiao said calmly. It was not that he wanted something new, but he found that this thing could treat blurry eyes. This was simply a miracle in the history of medicine. He wanted to bring it back for research and use it himself. "Elder son, what do you want this for?" Zhang Feng looked at Sun Simiao with a puzzled expression and asked curiously, "Could it be that you also have presbyopia?" Sun Simiao glanced at Zhang Feng and smiled awkwardly. "Old man, I don't know what you mean by presbyopia, but I do have it. Most importantly, this pair of glasses can treat presbyopia. I'm going to do some research on it, and it would be best if it could be promoted nationwide." "Yes, Fengzi." Li Yuan on the side interjected. "Since this pair of glasses can treat presbyopia, what's the harm in promoting it?" Zhang Feng nodded secretly. He had thought about promoting the glasses before, but he couldn't do a loss-making business, so he asked, "How much money can this make?" Sun Simiao frowned and was faintly displeased. Medicine is great and sacred. This guy actually measured it with money? He wanted to reprimand him, but when he thought that Feng Zi still had the technology, he suppressed the idea and had to agree. Old man doesn't know how much money it will make, but it should be no problem to benefit the world. So it is. Zhang Feng's eyes turned. In fact, he didn't have to make money. He just asked casually. After all, he already had a lot of money, but when he wanted to promote it, he couldn't help but feel pain. Then promote it. Okay. Sun Simiao nodded with satisfaction. Just now he didn't find this kid pleasing to the eye, but when these words came out, he instantly felt that Feng Zi was not bad. He smiled. Feng Zi really has awareness. It was not in vain for Bashi to accept you as a disciple. Zhang Feng curled his lips. He didn't plan to pay, so why talk about this? He was just about to ask about the promotion when a shout came from outside the cave. Dean, someone is looking for you. As soon as the voice fell, two men came in front of Zhang Feng. One was a worker in the cave, and the other was a servant of the Zhang mansion. Zhang Feng recognized the servant's identity at a glance and asked, "What are you looking for me for?" The servant glanced at the people around him, then strode forward and bent down beside Zhang Feng's ear. Zhang Feng didn't argue because he knew that since the servant was so cautious, there must be something important. "Master, something happened in Jiangnan." "What?" Zhang Feng stood up from the stool and stared at the servant with wide eyes. "What did you mean?" The servant was a little flustered. He glanced around and hurriedly went forward and whispered, "Someone just entered the Zhang mansion and said that something happened in Jiangnan. They asked Master to go back immediately." Huan Yan. Chapter 1996. Zhang Feng's pupils shrank. Speaking of Jiangnan, the first person he thought of was definitely Yu but Yu couldn't have come here. The only possibility was Huan Yan, who was protecting Yu. This guy was ordered to protect Yu with Jia Daoren. It was impossible for him to leave. Unless something had happened. This was the only possibility. Thinking of this, he strode out of the cave. "Feng Zi, where are you going?" Sun Simiao stood up and shouted. They were just talking about something. If this kid left, who would he talk to? Zhang Feng was in a hurry. He didn't care about this. He left in a hurry. Find Algernon about the glasses. Seeing this, Li Yuan vaguely guessed something and followed him out of the cave. Outside the cave, Zhang Feng walked down the mountain in a hurry. He didn't even bother to pay attention to Li Shimin and the others who were shooting arrows. Fortunately, the servants had prepared a carriage. Zhang Feng got in the carriage and rushed down the mountain. Unfortunately, it was not easy to ride a horse. Otherwise, he would have ridden down the mountain. After a while, Zhang Feng finally returned to the Zhang mansion. The servants who were carrying the palanquin were already sweating profusely from exhaustion. However, Zhang Feng was not in the mood to care about this. He strode into the mansion and shouted as soon as he entered, old Du, where did you die?" If the person from Jiangnan was Huan Yan, it must be Du Ziding who received him, so this old guy must know. In the hall, Du Ziding heard the shout and rushed out in a hurry. "Master, master." Huan Yan was trembling because of his injury, but the moment he saw Zhang Feng, it was as if he had seen his backbone. His body stiffened and he hurriedly said, "Master, you're finally back." Zhang Feng strode forward and supported Huan Yan. He hurriedly said, "Why are you back? Did something happen in Jiangnan?" Cough, cough. Huan Yan looked at Zhang Feng excitedly and didn't even notice that he was coughing. "Master, cough, cough. Miss Yu was by many young masters in Jiangnan. Cough, cough." As he spoke, he coughed again, but this time he coughed up blood. Zhang Feng held Huan Yan tightly and hurriedly asked, "What's wrong with you? Why is he coughing so badly?" Although he was worried about Yu, he was also worried about Huan Yan. Besides, Huan Yan came back from thousands of miles away to deliver the message. If anything happened to him, it would be terrible. Therefore, he had to be careful. However, Huan Yan didn't care as he stubbornly said, "Cough, cough. These are all minor injuries." Zhang Feng was no longer calm. Although Huan Yan said it was a minor injury, anyone with a discerning eye could see that it was a fatal injury. He turned to look at Du Ziding and hurriedly said, "Immediately find the best doctor in Chang'an." Du Ziding nodded. In fact, he had already gone to find the doctor, but he hadn't come yet. However, at this moment, a series of hurried footsteps could be heard. Prince Zhang, Zhang Yuyao and Jing Shu ran over holding their skirts. They had just heard that Prince Zhang had returned to the mansion, so they rushed over in a hurry. However, when they came over, they saw Prince Zhang supporting a man, which made them puzzled. Just as they were about to ask, Zhang Feng said, "Why are you here?" Zhang Yuyao stepped forward and smiled. "We sisters are here to see young master." Zhang Feng nodded slightly and ignored the two girls. He supported Huan Yin and walked to the hall. Now Huan Yin was the most important to him because he had important news. The two girls were a little puzzled. Prince Zhang wasn't usually like this. Although he didn't care about them, he would at least ask about their well-being. Why didn't he ask about them today? They looked at each other and felt that everything was related to the man, so they followed Zhang Feng into the hall. After entering the hall, Zhang Feng helped Huan Yin sit on a chair and hurriedly said, "What did you say about Yuer?" "Yuer?" The two girls' hearts skipped a beat and they looked at each other. Could it be that this man was here to send a message to Yuer? Or did something happen to Yuer over there? Something must have happened. Otherwise, how could he look so sick? They were very tactful. Even if they saw it, they didn't say much because they knew that in Prince Zhang's heart, Yuer was as important as them. It was unwise to interrupt, so they chose to watch silently. At this time, Huan Yin coughed twice again with traces of blood at the corner of his mouth. He said with a pale face, "You know that many young masters of the clans in Jiangnan covet Miss Yuer's beauty?" "Pa!" Zhang Feng slammed the table and stood up, shouting, "Sooner or later, I will make those guys pay the price." After that, he noticed the crowd and his expression eased a little. He looked at Huan Yin and said, "Go on, what's going on?" Huan Yin nodded and continued, "Those young masters of the clans not only coveted Miss Yuer's beauty, but they also coveted the Yu family's wealth and status. Thus, they used all means to make Miss Yuer submit, but Miss Yuer refused to submit. Thus, these clans attacked the Yu family through business, wanting to disintegrate the Yu family. Even the injuries on my body." Chapter 1997. Hearing this, Zhang Feng had already understood the whole story. He clenched his right fist and the blue veins on his neck stood out. He couldn't help it anymore. "These bastards even dare to touch my woman. Old Du, gather people immediately and kill these sons of bitches." As he spoke, he turned around and was about to walk out of the door. But at this moment, Jingshu stepped forward and stopped Zhang Feng. "Young master, wait. What are you doing?" Zhang Feng looked at Jingshu angrily. "Young master, don't be impulsive." Jingshu took Zhang Feng's hand and said with a pleading face, "There are many people in Jiangnan. We shouldn't fight recklessly." She was very worried that Prince Zhang would be trapped by the clans on impulse. Although she had accepted Yuer, when she saw that the young master was going to risk his life for the latter and offend the clans, her heart throbbed a little. It was not that she didn't want to save Yuer, but if it cost so much, she would rather Prince Zhang not go. Of course, it was also because of the selfishness of a woman. Thinking that her man was going to risk his life for another woman, anyone would feel a little uncomfortable. Zhang Yuyao was no exception. She hoped that Zhang Feng would take the risk himself. Even if the other party was Yuer, he could send someone to save her. What if there was any danger? It was not easy for her to get to this point with Prince Zhang. Naturally, she didn't want Prince Zhang to be in any danger. Thinking of this, she hurriedly persuaded, "Prince Zhang, Sister Jingshu is right. It's difficult to fight against them in Jiangnan now. Don't take the risk yourself." Zhang Feng naturally understood the reason. There were many clans in Jiangnan. If he went there, he would undoubtedly die. Even if he was a king or a minister, it was not enough. But who was he? He was Zhang Feng. His woman was being pursued by others. His woman was being hurt by others. How could he be indifferent? He glanced at the two women and said coldly, "I must go to Jiangnan." After that, he walked to the door. The two girls panicked. They chased after him while urging him to stay. Du Ziding also felt the seriousness of the situation. He shouldn't have been involved in the master's family matters, but he also knew the horror of Jiangnan. It was a giant beast that ate people without spitting out the bones. With the master's current strength, he would definitely be eaten to the bone if he went to Jiangnan. Therefore, he resolutely stood in front of Zhang Feng and said, "Master, it's very dangerous for you to go to Jiangnan now. Think about it, Jiangnan is not like Chang'an. You have no connections and no resources. How can you establish yourself there? In less than half a day, we will be eaten clean by the clan. What can we use to save Miss Yu?" Zhang Feng was stunned. To be honest, these words moved him a little because old Du was right. Without his own power in Jiangnan, what could he do even if he went? However, this thought only lasted for a moment, and he quickly regained his senses. He stared at Du Ziding and said word by word, "Even if there isn't, I'm still going to save you." After that, he walked out of the door with the momentum of a warrior who would never return. Du Ziding looked at the master's back and felt a little strange for a moment. He originally wanted to stop the master, but he didn't expect to make a fool of himself. The master's determination seemed to be firmer. He didn't object to the master saving Miss Yu. Instead, he supported it a little. After all, Yu was good and beautiful. It was also good to be Zhang Feng's mistress. However, they were going to Jiangnan where there were clans everywhere. The master was usually very smart. Why was he so stubborn this time? Thinking of this, he sighed secretly. He turned his head and saw Zhang Yuyao and Jingshu. At this time, the two girls were also filled with grief. They looked at Zhang Feng's back with tears in their almond-shaped eyes. Although they didn't consummate their marriage with Zhang Feng and didn't hold any ceremony, they had long regarded themselves as Zhang Feng's wife and concubine. Now, Prince Zhang was going to Jiangnan to save Yu Yu. They had already accepted Yu Yu in their hearts, but when they thought that Prince Zhang was going to take the risk for her, they felt sour in their hearts. Zhang Feng was completely unaware of this. He was only thinking about how to save Yu Yu. At this time, he had already stepped out of the door and was about to get on the high horse. Not far away there was a sound of horse hooves. Two carriages sped over and stopped directly at the gate of the Zhang mansion. The curtain of the carriage in front was lifted, and three people quickly walked down. They were Li Yuan, Li Shimin, and Qing Yaojing. "Lao Li, old Qing, why are you here?" Zhang Feng exclaimed. In his memory, these guys should still be in the forging workshop. Why did they suddenly come to the Zhang mansion? This made him a little confused. Li Shimin seemed to see Zhang Feng's confusion. He and Li Yuan looked at each other and deliberately changed the topic. "Fengzi, where are you going in such a hurry?" Zhang Feng then realized that he had important things to do. He didn't want to waste time with Li Shimin and hurriedly said, "I have something to do in Jiangnan." With that, he turned and walked to the horse. Li Shimin frowned and said to himself, "Not good." When he was in the forging workshop just now, Li Yuan had already reminded him that Fengzi might go to Jiangnan. It seemed that he was right. Chapter 1998. He hurriedly stepped forward and grabbed Zhang Feng. "Fengzi, Jiangnan is too dangerous now. Don't put yourself in danger." "Lao Tzu's woman is in danger now, and you're telling me not to go?" Zhang Feng glared at Li Shimin and shouted in dissatisfaction. "If it were you, what would you do?" Li Shimin choked and was a little speechless. He had never thought about this and would never think about it, so he didn't know how to answer. However, he still said earnestly, "I don't know about this and I don't want to know. But I know that if you go to Jiangnan now, something will happen. Also, what about the workshop? What about the textile factory? What about your efforts?" Zhang Feng narrowed his eyes. He was obviously a little moved. Just now, he only wanted to go to Jiangnan and didn't think about these things. Now that Li Shimin mentioned it, he was actually a little nervous. Yes, if he left, what would happen to the workshop? Although the composite bow had just been made, his glasses had fallen off again. And the research institute, the hot air balloon, was now being manufactured. What if something happened? Could Ma Zhou, Hao Chujun and the others hold on? And the manufacturing factory, Zhang Mansion? What would he do when the time came? He made a huge struggle in his heart. It was as if there were two souls, one telling him to go to the right and the other to the left. In the end, he made a decision and looked at Li Shimin resolutely. "I can't take care of everything. You take care of these things. If it doesn't work, there are others." As he spoke, he was about to get on the horse. At this time, a familiar voice sounded. "Wait," Zhang Feng frowned. He felt that this voice was a bit like his respected teacher's, but he also felt that something was off. His respected teacher couldn't possibly be here. Filled with doubt, he turned his head to look and his body unconsciously froze. The people who came were his teachers and the old scholar. There were a total of 5 people. Zhang Feng frowned slightly. He faintly felt that something was wrong. He had just arrived at Zhang Mansion. Why did his teachers come so quickly? And Lao Li, old Cheng and the others? Wasn't this too strange? Could it be that someone had tipped them off? He swept his gaze over everyone with a puzzled expression, only to see Li Yuan's eyes somewhat evasive. He instantly understood the whole story. When the servant came to report, only Sun Simiao and Old Master Li were there. Sun Simiao had nothing to do with it, so it must be Old Master Li who told everyone. With this thought, he stepped forward and cupped his hands to Yu Shernan and the others. "Respected teachers, I have an important matter to attend to in Jiangnan." "No." Yu Shernan narrowed his eyes. He knew why Zhang Feng wanted to go to Jiangnan. It was not that he wanted to stop him on purpose. It was just that Zhang Feng was his most valued disciple. He had placed almost all his efforts on this kid. Now he said he wanted to go to Jiangnan? Don't they know how dangerous Jiangnan is? That place was full of clans that ate people without spitting out the bones. It was precisely because he was born in a clan that he understood the methods of the clans and the clans in Jiangnan better. In order to achieve their goals, they did not care about the methods. A person like Feng Zi would definitely suffer if he went to Jiangnan. He would not allow such a thing to happen. He stroked his white beard and said solemnly, Feng Zi, since ancient times there have been many clans in Jiangnan. It is not as simple as you think. If they want to kill someone, they will not do it themselves. Instead, they will create public opinion and pressure. If you go there without any power, you will not be able to resist. Of course, he said these words only to calm Zhang Feng down. The power was not a big deal. The Yu family had a lot of power in Jiangnan. He just did not want Feng Zi to get involved in this mess. Zhang Feng could understand Yu Shernan's concern, but his heart had already flown to Jiangnan. It was useless to say more now. However, he could not ignore his teacher's words. He could only cup his hands and say, I understand what you are saying, but I must go to Jiangnan. There are people very important to me there. I hope you can understand. Have you forgotten about your academy? The old scholar opened his mouth. He stared at Zhang Feng with a serious face. The academy is your painstaking effort, and the year-end examination is about to begin. Are you going to leave just like that? Year-end examination? Zhang Feng was stunned. This was something he had prepared when he first set up the academy. Every year, the students had to take a year-end examination, and this examination was used to identify the students' grades. Now the academy was still using middle school textbooks. After the examination, they would need to use university textbooks. These were all his painstaking efforts. If he really left just like that, he would not be able to bear it. At this moment, he was a little hesitant. He did not need to care about the forging workshop, manufacturing factory, and research institute for the time being because there were people taking care of them. However, the academy was a little different. If he left just like that, what about the textbooks? So many years of hard work would be gone. Moreover, this was also irresponsible to the students. However, in Jiangnan, he was a little conflicted and did not know what to do. Li Shimin saw that Zhang Feng was in a deadlock and knew that the opportunity had come. He leaned over to Qing Yaojin and whispered in his ear, Go and call Big Black here. Chapter 1999. Qing Yaojin glanced at Zhang Feng, who was deep in thought, and instantly understood. Feng Zi wanted to go to Jiangnan because of Yu Qi, who was Yu Qigong's cousin. As long as Yu Qigong came to persuade him, it would be more effective than others. Thinking of this, he turned and slipped away. At this moment, Zhang Feng had come back to his senses. After thinking for a while, he still felt that it was more important to go to Jiangnan. The teaching materials could be delayed. If it really didn't work, he could write them in Jiangnan and send them over. If something happened to you, in Jiangnan, it would be too late for regrets. Therefore, he cupped his hands and said to the old scholar, Old scholar, I can understand what you said, but the matter in Jiangnan is imminent. I dare not delay, or I'm worried that Yu will be in danger. Yu? Xue Ji frowned and said with some dissatisfaction, Is Miss Yu more important than your career? You worked so hard to build the academy and now it's on the right track. I believe the academy has a high place in your heart. Now you want to leave the academy? Are you worthy of the academy? Are you worthy of the students of the academy? Also, the academy's end-of-year examination is imminent. Are you going to abandon the academy? Zhang Feng frowned and didn't know what to say, because these words made him feel a little ashamed. Indeed, he built the academy single-handedly and it was like his child. It was not good to just leave like this and even a little heartless. However, it wasn't that he wouldn't come back. The academy would still flourish in the future. It was just that this trip to Jiangnan was unpredictable, and it was hard to say what would happen in the future. However, he couldn't leave Yu alone. This made it difficult for him. But at this moment, there was the sound of horse hooves not far away. Zhang Feng was suddenly awakened. He looked in the direction of the sound and saw Yu Qigong and Qing Yaojin. Feng Zi, Yu Qigong shouted and jumped down before the horse stopped. He strode to Zhang Feng and said with a serious face, Feng Zi, I heard that you're leaving? Yes. Zhang Feng nodded and said with a serious expression, Yu is in danger in Jiangnan. I'm going to save her. Which bastard said that? Yu Qigong shouted loudly. His anger made his face appear red and black. There was a faint killing intent. Yu has not had a good time in Jiangnan, but it is definitely not as dangerous as you just said. On the way here, old Qing had told him that Feng Zi was going to Jiangnan, so he came this time to stop Zhang Feng from going to Jiangnan. Although Yu was in danger in Jiangnan, it was not to the point of imminent danger yet. Moreover, if Feng Zi went, it would obviously intensify the conflict between the clans, and Yu would be in even more danger. Zhang Feng knew that Yu Qigong was there to stop him, but he didn't know the situation in Jiangnan. Now that he heard about Yu Er's situation, he was a little anxious. He quickly asked, "What's going on? Is Yu Er in any danger?" Yu Qigong furrowed his brows slightly and glanced at Li Shimin. Only then did he say, "Yu Er is not in as much danger as you think in Jiangnan. She is originally from a clan. Even if other clans have thoughts about her, don't you still have me? How can I let her be bullied so easily?" Zhang Feng nodded. What old Yu said was very reasonable. Yu Er was his cousin. Even if she was in danger as her cousin, he could not ignore it. However, why would there be news from Jiangnan? He asked in confusion, but there is news from Jiangnan that Yu Er is now in a very dangerous situation and is about to be annexed by the clans. It's not that exaggerated. Yu Qigong flatly denied it. He looked deeply at Zhang Feng and said, "The Yu family's business has suffered a bit of a blow, but I've already helped them. Now the Yu family's situation has eased a bit, and Yu Er isn't in that much danger. Moreover, even if Yu Er was in danger as her older cousin, how could I ignore it? I also know about what happened to Jia Daoren. It was just an accident." Zhang Feng took a deep breath. He understood what Yu Qigong meant and believed his words, but he still felt a little uneasy. He could only ask, "Are you sure? Is Yu Er really not in danger?" He wanted to go to Jiangnan, but he was somewhat moved by Lao Li's words just now. In addition, his teacher's reprimand made him waver even more. Yes, the academy, the research institute, and the workshop were all his hard work. He really did not want to leave. However, these were not as important as Yu Er. For a moment, he did not even want to care about anything. He just wanted to go to Jiangnan to see Yu Er. However, when he thought of those clans and the people behind them, he felt that things were not so simple. Indeed, Yu Qigong and Li Shimin also thought so. At the same time, they also knew that most of the clans in Jiangnan were people or branches of the people behind them. That was why they urged Zhang Feng to stay. Otherwise, with Zhang Feng's personality, he would definitely cause a bloody storm in Jiangnan. At that time, it would be out of their control. Chapter 2000. Therefore Yu Qigong nodded and said, "Yes, Yu Er is not in danger for the time being. If you really want to save Yu Er, you should pave the way first so that you won't be in a hurry in the future." "Pave the way?" Zhang Feng frowned slightly and asked in confusion, "What do you mean?" Yu Qigong did not answer but turned to give Li Shimin a look. The latter understood, stepped forward and said earnestly, "Fengzi, I don't need to say anything. I think you know who those people in Jiangnan are, right?" Zhang Feng nodded and said, "They are all people of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes." "Yes." Li Shimin nodded slightly and said solemnly, "You had a conflict with the 5 surnames and 7 hopes before, and your business threatened their family business, so they are always thinking about how to deal with you. Am I afraid of them?" Zhang Feng frowned and was a little angry. "Those bastards are already dissatisfied with me, and this time they are even worse. I can't let them go like this. Don't stop me." "Fengzi," Li Shimin patted Zhang Feng on the shoulder and motioned for him to be quiet. Then he said earnestly, "I know you are not afraid of them, but you forgot one thing. Since those clans in Jiangnan hate you to the core, why don't they come to Chang'an City to deal with you? It's because they can't enter Chang'an City. But once you go out, you will undoubtedly be a sheep in a tiger's mouth, and there will be no return. They want to lure you out of Chang'an. If you go out like this, won't you fall into their trap? Moreover, with your current power, even if you can gain a foothold in Jiangnan, have you ever thought that there are so many clans in Jiangnan? If they unite, will you be a match for them?" At this point, he glanced at everyone and said indifferently, "Not to mention you, Fengzi, even if any of us present here, we don't have the confidence to deal with the Jiangnan clan. Their strength is beyond your imagination. When the time comes, can you still save Yu Er?" It was true that what he said was a little exaggerated, but it was true. There were really a few clans here who could deal with the Jiangnan clans. Even Qing Yaojin and Yu Qigong, who had always been arrogant and domineering, lowered their proud heads because they knew that Li Shimin was right, especially Qing Yaojin. Although he looked rough, he knew it well. His wife was the Chui clan in Qinghe. Otherwise, why would he be so afraid of his wife? A dignified soldier was afraid of a woman. This would be a laughingstock if it was spread out, but it was not uncommon in Chang, and especially in the imperial court. It was not only Qing Yaojin but also Zhangsun Wuji Du Ruhui and others. They all married the daughters of the clans, and some of them had the Chui clan's daughters. These marriages could make their families more powerful and prosperous. This was one of the reasons why many people wanted to marry the daughters of the clans. Zhang Feng naturally knew about this trend, but the anger in his heart had already burned him. He did not care about what Li Shimin said. He shouted, "Laoli, I know what you said. Do you want me to leave you her to die and not save her?" He stared at Li Shimin with red eyes. At this moment in his opinion, Laoli was stopping him. "Fengzi, don't be impulsive." Li Shimin put his hands on Zhang Feng's shoulders and comforted him. "Didn't Lao Yu say it just now? Your is not in danger." As he spoke he gave Yu Qigong a look. The latter understood and quickly stepped forward. "Yes, Fengzi, your is not in danger now. Since you want to find her, you have to prepare. How are you going to face the Jiangnan clans? Otherwise it will be useless." "No." Yu Shernan stepped forward and glanced at Yu Qigong with his slightly muddy eyes. "Not only can Fengzi not go to Jiangnan, but he can't deal with the clans and the Chui clan." He originally wanted to stop Fengzi from going to Jiangnan, but the more he listened, the more he felt that something was wrong. These guys were actually encouraging Fengzi to deal with the clans. Did they not know how powerful the clans were? Wasn't this sending Fengzi to his death? Moreover, he, Chu Suiliang, and the others were also from the clans, but they belonged to some small clans. Even if they were small clans, they still had some nostalgia in their hearts. Now that they heard that Fengzi was going to deal with the clans, what they were most worried about was not implicating themselves, but Fengzi's safety. Yu Qigong was big and rough, so he naturally did not think of this. He looked at Yu Shernan and asked, "Old Yu, what do you mean? Why can't we deal with them now?" Yu Shernan glared at Yu Qigong, stroked his beard, and narrowed his eyes. The Jiangnan clans usually look like a plate of loose sand, but once they encounter an external enemy, they will immediately unite. Moreover, now that the Jiangnan clans have united, Fengzi is even more difficult to deal with, so we can't act rashly. "What do you think, master?" Zhang Feng looked at Yu Shernan and asked anxiously. He was naturally not worried about Yu Shernan and the others stopping him, but he was worried about those clans. Chapter 2001. Yu Shernan glanced deeply at Zhang Feng. "Right now the Jiangnan clans are gathering together. Naturally we can't deal with them all at once. We have to break them one by one." Zhang Feng nodded. In reality he already had an idea in his heart. Now that he heard his teacher's opinion, he was even more certain. He swept his gaze over the crowd and said solemnly, "Actually there is a way." Speaking to this point, Li Shimin patted Zhang Feng's shoulder and interrupted, "Come, let's talk inside." Only now did Zhang Feng realize that they had been standing at the door all this time. He swept his gaze over the crowd. "Everyone, let's talk inside." This topic was too sensitive. He couldn't just stand at the door and talk with assurance. Otherwise, if someone with ulterior motives heard it, it might lead to a fatal disaster. Everyone also understood. They nodded and followed Zhang Feng's back as he walked through the door. In the hall, Zhang Feng ordered the servants to serve tea and then dismissed everyone at the door. Li Shimin gently sipped the tea and looked at Zhang Feng. "Fengzi, to continue the topic just now, what plans do you have for the 5 surnames and 7 hopes?" The 5 surnames and 7 hopes had always been a thorn in his heart and also a thorn in the Tang Dynasty. They were powerful and deeply rooted. They were basically old monsters that had been passed down for hundreds or even thousands of years. Since ancient times they had enjoyed lofty prestige and status. Furthermore, the 5 surnames and 7 hopes were connected by marriage. In order to make the clan even stronger, they did not allow the daughters of the clan to marry outside, much less marry into the imperial family. The Li imperial family scoffed at this point. However, in their hearts, they still hoped to marry a daughter of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes. After all, marrying a daughter of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes was equivalent to half a person of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes. They could also obtain a portion of their support. Not only the imperial family but even the large clans of Guanzhong also had this thought. There were even noblemen who said, "The only regret in my life is that I have not been able to marry a daughter of the 5 surnames." From these points, it could be seen how terrifying the 5 surnames and 7 hopes were. It was true that the Li surname of the imperial family was also a branch of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes. When Li Yuan raised his army, he received the support of the Li family of Longxi, the Li family of Zhao County, and the other 5 surnames and 7 hopes. However, since the founding of the country, the 5 surnames and 7 hopes had gradually become arrogant and despotic. This was also one of the reasons why Li Shimin wanted to suppress the 5 surnames and 7 hopes. Zhang Feng didn't know much about this, but he already had a plan in mind. He said, "Since we've decided to do it, we naturally have to uproot these guys." Hearing this, Li Shimin's interest was immediately piqued. He hurriedly asked, "What do you mean?" Zhang Feng glanced at the crowd and said with a gloomy face, "Those clans in Jiangnan are already deeply rooted. They have many henchmen and disciples in the imperial court. They also have a lot of prestige in the Tang dynasty and faintly threaten the status of the imperial family. However, there are also many hedonistic sons. This time when we go to Jiangnan, the first thing we have to do is to kill those hedonistic sons. Speaking of this, a cold light flashed in his eyes. There was no other reason than these hedonistic sons coveting you. The reason why those hedonistic sons became hedonistic sons is that many of them have extraordinary positions in the clans. This time, I want to control them and then attack the clan's enterprises. As he spoke, he suddenly remembered something. His teachers and many of the people present were from the clans. It seemed that he didn't respect them too much by saying this, so he simply didn't speak. However, Li Shimin was anxious. He hurriedly urged, "Fengzi, what are you talking about? Hurry up and say it." Zhang Feng glanced at the crowd and still didn't speak. The old scholar at the side had sharp eyes and saw the clues. He stroked his beard and said with a smile, "Fengzi, just say it. It's okay. No one will blame you." He was alone and didn't belong to any clan. It was fine if he said it. Moreover, now Fengzi's attention was all on the 5 surnames and 7 hopes. He didn't have any plans to go to Jiangnan. This was a good thing. Of course, he had to be encouraged. Yu Shernan narrowed his eyes and seemed to have seen something. He smiled and said, "That's right. Although there are many clans present, they are not people from the 5 surnames and 7 hopes. Fengzi, you can speak freely." Hearing these words, Fengzi's heart was finally at ease. He said faintly, "Actually, I have already thought about it before. The reason why the 5 surnames and 7 hopes can rise is because they have a large number of people and their unparalleled family business. Therefore, if we want to attack them, we must first start from these 2 aspects." "That's right." Li Yuan at the side nodded. He was the one who knew the 5 surnames and 7 hopes the best because he was born in the Li family of Taiyuan, which was a very large branch of the Li family of Longxi. When he started the war, he received great support from the Longxi group. However, later these guys gradually became blind and arrogant. They thought that without them, the Li family couldn't be the emperor at all. Therefore, they spread some rumors among the people and began to rope in other clans. However, when he had just become the emperor, the royal family had no way to fight against the 5 surnames and 7 hopes. Even now, Erlang could only suppress them but not completely suppress them. Otherwise, it would be counterproductive. Thinking of this, he frowned and said, "The whole Tang dynasty is full of people from the 5 surnames and 7 hopes. Not only the rural scholars but also the inside and outside of the court can't be spared. However, they have a large number of people and can't be easily attacked." Chapter 2002. Everyone nodded in unison. They were in Guangzhou. Although they did not have much contact with the 5 surnames and 7 hopes, they could understand the terror of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes. No matter what happened in the world, these people could often predict the future and take people by surprise. Zhang Feng glanced at everyone, smiled and shook his head. "You can't be so absolute. Although the 5 surnames and 7 hopes have a large number of people, most of them are mediocre people. The real power is still in the hands of a few people. Think about it. If you can control their population, won't you be able to control the development of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes?" Control the population? Li Shimin was slightly taken aback. In fact, he had thought of this method before. He had even discussed it with Zhangsun Wuji, Du Ruhui, Wei Zheng and other officials, but the final result was not satisfactory. Because Wei Zheng believed that even if the population was controlled, it was nothing more than restricting the marriage of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes. However, this would definitely cause the dissatisfaction of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes, and gradually cut off their connection with the court. This was not a good thing for the court. Zhangsun Wuji believed that this could be done. Although the 5 surnames and 7 hopes were powerful, they were still the people of the Tang dynasty. As long as an imperial edict was issued, even if they secretly disobeyed the imperial order, they had to obey on the surface. Because they were a clan, they would not lose the face of the entire clan because of a small matter. In this way, they would have to marry some women to weaken the power of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes. In the end, the 2 sides argued endlessly, and this proposal was not issued for a long time. But he did not expect Fengzi to mention this today. Did Fengzi think of this method long ago? He was somewhat puzzled and asked curiously, "Fengzi, did you think of this method before?" "Before?" Zhang Feng laughed embarrassedly. In fact, this method did exist in history. He just used it temporarily. However, he could not reveal it to Li Shimin at this time, so he said half-jokingly, "More or less. I thought of it but I just said it today." "Have you thought about how to implement it?" Li Shimin asked. This was a problem that the 2 officials of the imperial court had been debating for a long time. If they could find the best solution from Fengzi, He believed that the two old men Zhang Sun Wuji and Wei Zheng would have nothing to say. Zhang Feng narrowed his eyes as if he was thinking about something. No one made a sound for fear of disturbing Zhang Feng. Just like this, the hall was unusually quiet. After about a quarter of an hour, his eyes flashed and a smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. I can ask His Majesty to issue an edict to restrict marriage. All men and women with different surnames are prohibited from marrying. Li Shimin looked at Zhang Feng disappointedly. He thought that it would be some great trick, but in the end it was still the same. He had already discussed it with Wei Zheng and the others. He said with a bit of disappointment, Fengzi, I'm afraid this method won't work. Think about it. On the surface, the edict can restrict marriage, but secretly, no one knows whether they are people with different surnames or not. Moreover, if the people with different surnames are disgusted, what will happen if they suddenly leave the imperial court? You have to know that there are many people with different surnames in the imperial court. This is very unfavorable for the imperial court. These words were basically Wei Zheng's original words. He did not notify the edict. If it backfired, it would not benefit the imperial court at all. Of course, Li Shimin also knew the pros and cons, so he dared to say it to Zhang Feng. Zhang Feng naturally didn't know about this, but he smiled with a hint of contempt. Old Li, I don't know who told you this or if it's your own opinion, but in my eyes it's a big mistake. Oh, how do you know? Li Yuan opened his mouth. He had heard clearly just now and knew that Erlang and Fengzi were talking about different surnames, so he did not interrupt. However, when he heard Fengzi say that it was very wrong, he could not help but be surprised because he and Erlang stood on the same position. First, they had to think about the royal family and the people. From the words just now, Fengzi obviously had a different view. Indeed, Zhang Feng had a different view because he and Li Shimin had different positions, so their attitudes were different. Now that he saw Li Yuan ask, he could not help but ask, Old Master Li, may I ask, when should the women of the Tang Dynasty get married? Li Yuan did not expect Fengzi to ask such a common question. He had doubts in his heart, but thinking that Fengzi might have some secrets, he still frowned and said, the smallest golden hairpin can't be older than the marriageable age, which is between 12 and 15 years old. This age is suitable. Zhang Feng asked again, what about the man? Li Yuan's frown deepened. A weak crown is the most suitable. Zhang Feng smiled. Then the 5 surnames must be the same? Li Yuan did not answer immediately, but pondered because he felt like he had discovered something, but he could not say it. Seeing that Fengzi was a little anxious, he said, the 5 surnames are a little different from ordinary people. The children of their clan are often betrothed when they are children. Before they are born, they have already been married. When they grow up, they will naturally be married, but... Chapter 2003. Speaking of this, he frowned as if he had thought of something, but these are the minority. Only some children with status in the clan will be betrothed. The others are arranged by the parents of both sides, and they are not allowed to interfere. Some of them don't even know what the bride looks like on the day of the wedding. This is also one of the reasons why there are so many people in the 5 surnames and 7 hopes. No one dares to object. Hearing this, Zhang Feng could not help but sigh. The Tang dynasty was already so open, but those clans still did this. However, although this method was not very clever, it was very beneficial to the development of the clan. At the same time, he was also glad that they were not arranged by others. After sighing with emotion, he coughed twice and said, so that's the case. Then the marriage restriction order is much more convenient. What do you mean? Li Shimin frowned and quickly said, the marriage restriction order is an imperial edict, and these clans have always intermarried. In this way, those clans will definitely be dissatisfied. Why do you say it's much more convenient? Zhang Feng glanced at everyone and said with a smile, think about it, which man doesn't want to have 3 wives and 4 concubines? Hearing this, everyone could not help but blush. Zhang Feng was right, but it was still a bit indecent to say this in public, especially Yu Shernan and the others. It was a bit harsh to hear, so they hurriedly urged, hurry up and continue. Oh, perhaps he felt his teacher's dissatisfaction. Zhang Feng repeatedly agreed and continued, for those big clans as well as those arranged marriages between 5 families and 7 sons, even if it can make the clan powerful, the young people in the clan will definitely be dissatisfied. Needless to say, the men will want to marry all of them, but what about the women? If they marry a good husband, then it's fine, but if they marry a prodigal son, then wouldn't their lives be ruined? Therefore, I dare to say that these women will definitely have resentment in their hearts, but they usually don't dare to speak out and suppress it in their hearts. Over time, these women shouldn't be able to live for long, right? Li Shimin frowned as if he was thinking about something. Indeed, many women in the 5 surnames and 7 hopes died early, and many died as soon as they married into their husbands' families. But what does this have to do with the marriage restriction order? He asked in confusion. Fengzi, even if what you said just now makes sense, what does this marriage restriction order have to do with it? It seems that you still don't understand. Zhang Feng picked up the cold tea and took a sip. He smiled and said, think about it. If the marriage restriction order is announced, who will be the first to be happy? Who would be the first to be happy? Li Shimin furrowed his brows, unable to wrap his head around it. If this marriage restriction was announced, it would definitely be boycotted. Who would be happy about it? Moreover, the people in power with different surnames would not allow it. Who would be happy? What was in Feng Zi's head? Just as he was ridiculing Zhang Feng, he suddenly recalled what Zhang Feng had said earlier. A woman with 5 surnames and 7 looks? Those women whose marriages were arranged? If the marriage restriction order was announced, those women should be happy. Fengzi had just said that many of these women's marriages were unlucky, and some of them might be abused, especially those women from small clans. If they married into a big family like the 5 surnames and 7 hopes, it would be fine if they met a good husband, but if they met a bad one they might regret it for the rest of their lives. Presumably, once the marriage restriction order was announced, they would have more freedom. They might even be able to freely choose a husband. For those women, it was undoubtedly a gamble. However, would they give up the conditions of marrying into a rich and powerful family? Li Shimin was puzzled. He looked at Zhang Feng and asked, Fengzi, I roughly understand what you said, but why would those women listen? Whether they listen or not is a small matter. Zhang Feng waved his hand and did not care. He smiled and said, the most important thing is the marriage restriction order. Li Shimin frowned and looked at Li Yuan. Then he turned to look at Zhang Feng. What do you mean? Wait a minute. Zhang Feng waved his hand and interrupted Li Shimin. Then he took out a few cigarettes from his waist and scattered them on Li Shimin's table. Then he handed one to Li Yuan, Qing Yaojin, Yu Shernan and the others. Then he returned to his seat and took out a lighter to light the cigarette. He took a deep breath and looked at Li Shimin. He smiled awkwardly. Sorry, I'm addicted to smoking. You can continue. Li Shimin did not blame Zhang Feng because his addiction to smoking also came. Seeing that Zhang Feng was smoking enthusiastically, he picked up the cigarette from the table and lit it. He took a deep breath and said slowly, just now I asked you why you said the most important thing is the marriage restriction order? Zhang Feng took the cigarette butt and looked deeply at Li Shimin. He said, the marriage restriction order is indeed only superficial. It may be able to deal with those small clans, but it's not enough to deal with the 5 families and 7 Wangs and the Guanlong clan. Because they have the strength to refute His Majesty, and even dare to refute His Majesty. Hearing this, Li Shimin's eyes narrowed and a murderous aura flashed. Chapter 2004. Indeed, these guys were powerful. Sometimes, not only would they not listen to the imperial edict, they would even refute it. However, this was only a small minority. Even if it was a small minority, it still made him feel ashamed. Think about it, a behemoth comparable to the royal family was entrenched in the Tang Dynasty. Any emperor would toss and turn restlessly, let alone him, Li Shimin. How could an emperor allow such a thing to happen? However, he really had no good ideas now. He could only talk with Feng Zi. At this time, Feng Zi spoke again. However, with the marriage restriction order, it is equivalent to having a shackle that can trap the 5 surnames and 7 hopes. Those with status will naturally not be moved, but those at the bottom will definitely not be able to hold it in, especially those women. Their lifelong dream is to marry a good husband. Once this marriage restriction order is issued, those women will definitely speak out, and those with status will suppress those women. As time goes by, the two will have conflicts. In this way, the marriage between the 5 surnames and 7 hopes will be eased, but what? Li Shimin hurriedly said. He just understood that this kid was stuck, which made him very unhappy. However, this method will take a long time to be effective. Zhang Feng smoked his cigarette and narrowed his eyes, and it also needs someone to cooperate. Li Shimin frowned. Who do you need to cooperate with? Zhang Feng glanced at everyone and said solemnly, if you want the cooperation of other clans as long as it is a famous clan, it will be fine. When the women of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes reach the age of 12 to 14, let the young masters of the clans come to propose marriage. This? Li Shimin glanced at Li Yuan, then looked at Zhang Feng, revealing a difficult expression. I'm afraid this is a bit difficult. How can those young masters of the clans be so obedient? It's not difficult. Zhang Feng took a deep breath and said slowly, Think about it, in that clan the people are not proud of marrying women of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes. As long as you encourage them, those guys will definitely be more active than the other. Li Shimin nodded slightly. He knew that what Feng Zi said was right. Indeed, many clans were proud of marrying women of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes. There were even many court officials who wanted to go, including some relatives of the emperor. But even if you want to marry her, does she have to marry you? The people of the 5 surnames and 7 Wangs were all arrogant people. Even if there was a marriage restriction order, it might not be able to stop them from getting married. Li Shimin was very clear about this point. He said, "What you said is not wrong, but how can a woman of unknown surnames marry? Even if they wanted to marry, would the elders in the clan agree?" He originally thought that this would make Feng Zi give up on this idea, but unexpectedly he just smiled. "I know all this, but think about it, what if the marriage restriction order is only half?" Limit of half. Li Shimin was stunned. Could it be that Feng Zi meant to restrict half of the people with the 5 surnames and 7 hopes and leave the other half unrestricted? Would this be effective? He was a little puzzled and asked, "You mean to restrict half of the people and leave the other half unrestricted?" Zhang Feng nodded and exhaled a mouthful of smoke, then slowly said, "The 5 surnames and 7 hopes are a total of 7 distinguished clans. As long as 4 of the 5 distinguished clans are restricted from marriage and the other 3 are not restricted, then the women of these 3 distinguished clans will be digested internally. Over time, the blood relationship will become closer and closer." Li Shimin frowned. He was a little puzzled. Wasn't it a good thing that the blood relationship was getting closer and closer? The bloodline in the clan would also become purer and purer. Why did it seem like it was a bad thing in Feng Zi's words? He interrupted in confusion. "Feng Zi, isn't it a good thing that your blood relationship is getting closer and closer to the clan? Haven't they always hoped for this? Why do you look so happy?" Everyone also nodded because in their opinion, it was a good thing to marry close relatives, especially between cousins. This was simply a match made in heaven. In particular, some big clans such as the 5 surnames and 7 hopes, thought that their bloodline was noble, so they constantly adopted the method of marrying close relatives to ensure the purity of their bloodline. Moreover, they believed that if they married other women, it would tarnish their bloodline, so they could only marry close relatives to avoid the confusion of their bloodline. In addition, men in the Tang dynasty generally had 3 wives and 4 concubines. A man would have many concubines, and the women born by these concubines were all daughters of concubines, but they would be placed under the name of the master's wife. The most favorite was to marry their own cousin. On the surface they were called cousins, but in fact they might not have any blood relationship at all. It was just because they were placed under the name of the master's wife, and the master's wife was their aunt, so the women born by these concubines had to be called cousins. The third point was the point of strengthening the relationship. They all believed that in the 3rd generation the relationship would gradually drift apart, and only through marriage could this layer of interest be locked again. Most importantly, they did not know the harm of marrying close relatives. Even if there were some deformities, they would often blame it on the women, saying that these women were indecent or were cursed. Chapter 2005. The people present did not know this, but Zhang Feng's heart was as clear as a mirror. He smiled and explained, "What you said is not wrong. Everyone thinks that it is very good to marry close relatives, and it can prevent the family bloodline from being tainted. But do you know the harm of marrying close relatives?" "There is harm in marrying close relatives?" Li Shimin looked at Zhang Feng with a shocked face. In his impression, many high-ranking officials were married close relatives, and there were also some clans with different surnames. These guys still thought that there was nothing wrong. Wait a minute, it seemed not necessarily. The concubine of the Taiyuan Wang clan master's illegitimate son gave birth to a baby a few days ago, and it seemed that there was something wrong with the baby's head. Moreover, this illegitimate son seemed to have married his cousin. Could it be that what Feng Zi said was true? The others also looked at Zhang Feng with a doubtful face. Because in their influence, many people were the products of close relatives. How could those people be fine? When it came to Feng Zi's mouth, why did it become a sinful thing? Li Yuan was somewhat puzzled. He looked deeply at Zhang Feng trying to see something, but he could not see anything. He could only ask, "Feng Zi, is what you said true or false?" Zhang Feng nodded heavily, laughing in his heart at the ignorance of the ancients. But thinking that he was also an ancient person, he could only explain, "There should be many examples of close relatives marrying close relatives around you, right? How are those people? Not to mention other things, at least half of the people who marry close relatives are mentally retarded. I can guarantee this." Hearing this, everyone lowered their heads and pondered. Scenes of marriage in the past appeared in their minds. The cousins of the Xian family, the cousins of the Gu family, the cousins of the Ji family, these were all close relatives. Their children really seemed to have some problems. Not to mention all of them, at least half of them were mentally retarded. However, the other half seemed to be more intelligent than ordinary people. What was going on? Li Shimin asked curiously. Fengzi, I admit that what you said just now makes sense. There may be some harm in marrying close relatives, but what about those who have been intelligent since they were young? Zhang Feng smiled, took a sip of tea and said, those who have been smart since they were young are just lucky, but they also have misfortune. That is, their lifespan is shorter than ordinary people. Anyway, there is no benefit in marrying close relatives. You just need to know this. He didn't intend to explain too much. He couldn't possibly tell them about the genetic factors, the mutations that couldn't be produced by their descendants, and the harmful genes that were passed on to their descendants. Even if he did, the people present probably wouldn't understand. However, Li Yuan was a bit stupefied. Fengzi, just now, you talked a lot about the dangers of marrying close relatives. What exactly do you mean? Do you want to use this method to deal with the clan? Old Master Li is still the one who sees things clearly. Zhang Feng glanced at Li Yuan and didn't forget to praise him. Then he glanced at everyone. The dangers of close relatives that I said just now are just paving the way for the marriage restriction order. Think about it. Once the marriage restriction order is issued, what will happen if 3 of the families are not restricted? They will definitely worry that the marriage restriction order will fall on their heads one day. Although they are not afraid, it is not good to refuse on the surface. Therefore, they will definitely cherish the resources and madly let the people in the clan marry. In this way, it is inevitable that they will marry close relatives. Of course, this is a good thing for them. However, they don't know the dangers of marrying close relatives. As long as there are 10 pairs, it is guaranteed that half of them will be mentally retarded. In this way, after a long time, the population of these clans will definitely decrease sharply. Hearing this, Yu Shernan frowned, because he was somewhat dissatisfied with Fengzi's approach. Although the idea of marrying close relatives has not been implemented yet, if it is true, this is the idea of exterminating the clan. There will definitely be a storm. If the people of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes know the truth that Fengzi is the mastermind, it will probably lead to huge revenge. He looked at Zhang Feng worriedly and said, Fengzi, your method is a bit vicious. If the people of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes know the truth, I'm afraid. Originally, Li Yuan was listening excitedly. When he saw Yu Shernan interrupt, he was immediately dissatisfied. However, it was not good for him to flare up. He could only faintly pander. Bashi, this is your fault. It's not like you don't know what kind of people these people of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes are. Fengzi's plan? He glanced at Zhang Feng and seemed to have a guilty conscience. He coughed twice and said, this plan is not as vicious as you said. Besides, marrying close relatives has been happening since ancient times. Fengzi just raised a point of view. It doesn't matter. Moreover, even if marrying close relatives is really harmful, will those clans be worried? They can't wait for the whole clan to marry close relatives. There was nothing wrong with these words. The words were rough, but the truth was not rough. Even if the people of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes knew that marrying close relatives was harmful, they would probably not prohibit it, because they thought that their bloodline was noble and could not be tarnished. Moreover, wouldn't half of them be smarter than ordinary people? Would the people of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes refuse such temptation? Chapter 2006. But Yu Shernan did not think so. He felt that this plan was not right. But when he thought about how the 5 surnames and 7 hopes wanted to deal with his student, he understood. Moreover, the 5 surnames and 7 hopes were so powerful. This little plan should not be difficult for them, right? He comforted himself in his heart. He looked at Zhang Feng and asked, Fengzi, what do you think of this plan? If you have decided, I will not stop you. After all, the 5 surnames and 7 hopes were unkind to you first. Zhang Feng was still thinking about what his teacher had said. When he heard that his teacher did not stop him, he was overjoyed. Thank you, teacher. Although this plan is a little extreme, it will take a long time to work. It is a gradual method, so teacher does not have to worry about anything. Yu Shernan nodded. He was originally worried about Fengzi's safety, but when he heard this, he felt much more at ease. Li Shimin saw that Yu Shernan did not say anything. He quickly said, Fengzi, you said that marriage is not restricted to the 3 clans. What about the other 4 clans? Since they are restricted from marriage, then the situation you mentioned should not happen, right? Zhang Feng nodded. Indeed, the 3 clans that are not restricted are unlucky. As long as they are internally digested, their population will definitely decrease sharply. As for the other 4 clans, as he spoke, He glanced at everyone with a malicious smile. It is the method I just mentioned. Since these 4 clans are restricted from marriage, then the women in the clans can't not marry, right? At this time the other clans will swarm over like flies smelling rotten meat. At that time you can send people to instigate them. These 4 clans will definitely marry their women out. Hearing this, Li Shimin only had this thought in his mind. Brilliant, this move was really brilliant. The marriage restriction order restricted the women of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes within the clans. They could not marry between the first and second generation, right? This way the women would gradually grow up and have to marry outside. At this time the other clans could interfere and gradually divide the strength of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes. For a moment, he seemed to see the scene of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes marrying outside. However, he quickly regained his senses because he realized something else. What should he do if he was driven to desperation? Although these fellows would obey the imperial edict on the surface, what if they disobeyed in secret? One had to know that none of these guys were in Chang'an. Even if he wanted to find evidence, he couldn't do anything to them. Moreover, even if they didn't obey, he couldn't do anything to them. He was a bit distressed. Looking at Zhang Feng, he hurriedly asked, Fengzi, there's no problem with the schemes you mentioned, but I'm worried that the 5 surnames and 7 Wangs will do one thing on the surface and another in the dark. Moreover, what if they're driven to desperation? Zhang Feng waved his hand and didn't mind because he already had a countermeasure in mind. He smiled and said, You don't have to worry about that. Since I can come up with the marriage restriction plan, I naturally have a follow-up plan. Just now was just an appetizer. Let's call it the first plan. Now, we need to cooperate with the second plan. Plan B? Li Shimin frowned. He didn't know what other plan Fengzi had. Could it be more powerful than this plan? Everyone also looked at Zhang Feng in surprise. They had been listening and didn't know what the second plan was. This obviously aroused their curiosity. Especially Li Yuan, it could be said that he wanted to deal with the 5 surnames and 7 Wangs the most. Just now, when he heard Fengzi mention the marriage restriction order, he knew that it couldn't be implemented in a short time. He couldn't help but feel a little disappointed. Who would have thought that this kid had a follow-up plan? He hurriedly asked, What's the second plan? Zhang Feng gently took a sip of tea, glanced at the crowd and said, Do you still remember the 2 points I just said to deal with the 5 surnames and 7 Wangs? One is population and the other is family property. Just now, I was talking about population and now I'm talking about family property. Family property? Li Shimin's eyes narrowed. Obviously he was interested. He knew that the family property of the 5 surnames and 7 Wangs had expanded throughout the Tang Dynasty. It was not an exaggeration to say that they were as rich as a country. When the army was raised, those guys sent a lot of gold, silver, and jewelry to show their support for the Li family. But he knew that those gold, silver, and jewelry were less than 1/10 of the 5 surnames and 7 Wangs. Since he ascended the throne, as soon as he heard the news of the refugees suffering, he unconsciously thought of these jewelry and the wealth of the 5 surnames and 7 Wangs over the years. If these guys were willing to take out half of the money, the national power of the Tang Dynasty would definitely double. Of course, he usually had the idea to deal with the 5 surnames and 7 Wangs, but these guys avoided it every time, and they didn't commit any crime, which led to the relationship between the two sides becoming more and more stiff. Now, Fengzi was actually going to deal with the 5 surnames and 7 Wangs family property? Didn't this guy know that the 5 surnames and 7 Wangs were a hard bone to chew? Even he couldn't do anything. What could this guy do? Although this idea was good, it was really unrealistic. However, he didn't want to dampen Fengzi's enthusiasm, so he had to ask, Fengzi, what can you do? Those guys are not easy to deal with. Don't get yourself into trouble. Chapter 2007. He felt that it was necessary to give Fengzi a warning first, otherwise, it would not be good if this guy had any dangerous ideas. Unexpectedly, Zhang Feng did not care at all, waving his hand casually, You don't have to worry about this, I'm not going to fight with them openly, they just have a big family business, then I'll use the family business to play them to death. What do you mean? Li Yuan was interested. You should all know about the inventions I made before, like cotton-padded clothes, braised meat, and those clothes in the textile factory. Zhang Feng glanced at everyone. Seeing that everyone nodded, he continued, Now, people with 5 surnames and 7 hopes are looking for me to buy goods. It can be said that I'm their parent. Li Yuan had an idea, as if he thought of something. Fengzi, you mean to stop the goods in their hands? No. Zhang Feng shook his head and put out the cigarette in his hand. Then he said, Even if they stop selling the goods in their hands, they can choose not to use them and find other goods to replace them. They can also buy from other vendors. They will never lose money. Li Shimin frowned. Then what do you mean? Keep their goods? That's right. Zhang Feng nodded slightly, revealing a meaningful smile. Not only keep their goods but also increase their goods, even give as much as they want. Li Shimin was a little confused. Wasn't this a blow to their 5 surnames and 7 hopes? Why keep the goods? Instead, increase the sales of goods? Wasn't this giving money to the other party? At this moment he even felt that Feng Zi had really become a lunatic. However, when he saw the smile on Feng Zi's face, he felt that things were not so simple. There seemed to be something wrong, but he could not say what was wrong. In fact, everyone present had this feeling. They basically all knew Zhang Feng very well. Although this kid was usually unruly, he was more serious than anyone when he was serious. Saying this now, there must be some mystery. Therefore they chose to wait and see. However, Li Yuan could not sit still. He asked, somewhat puzzled, Feng Zi, what do you mean by what you said just now? Why do you want to increase the goods of 5 surnames and 7 hopes? Zhang Feng smiled. Listen to me tell you a story first. Everyone was a little confused. They came to listen to you about the things of 5 surnames and 7 hopes, not to listen to a story. What story was this Feng Zi telling now? But on second thought, since this Feng Zi could say it, it must be an important matter, so they kept quiet and waited and watched. Looking at Zhang Feng, he took a sip of tea and continued. The 2 brothers were both businessmen. They usually had a good relationship. They were usually the seller who bought the goods. One day this seller wanted to see the relationship between the 2 brothers, so he thought of a way to start increasing the goods by 10%. The 2 brothers were very happy, thinking that they had met a good person. The next day the seller increased the goods by 30%. The 2 brothers were even more grateful to this seller. On the 3rd day the seller increased the goods by another 50%. The effect was naturally needless to say. The 2 brothers simply regarded the buyer as a sage. But on the 4th day, this seller only gave the goods to Big Brother and gave 60%, not to Little Brother. Little Brother instantly felt that something was wrong, thinking that Big Brother bribed the seller to cut off his livelihood. Big Brother did not know anything but still doted on Little Brother, so he gave half of his goods to Little Brother. By the 5th day the seller still gave Big Brother the goods, not Little Brother. Little Brother felt more and more that something was wrong. In the beginning I still gave some face to Big Brother. Later on, I directly questioned Big Brother. Big Brother naturally did not know anything. At this time the seller came and said that only one person could buy his goods in the future. Little Brother instantly understood something. It was all Big Brother's doing. The 2 brothers broke off their relationship. Seller? 2 brothers? Li Shimin frowned and relaxed. Sometimes he kept feeling that Feng Zi's words were not just on the surface. There seemed to be something else hidden, but he could not think of anything for a while. Seller? He repeated in his heart again. Suddenly he understood something. Wasn't the seller Feng Zi? Then these 2 brothers were the 5 surnames and 7 hopes. Could it be that Feng Zi was preparing to use this method to deal with the 5 surnames and 7 hopes? He hurriedly said, Feng Zi, what you meant just now was that you are the seller, and the 2 brothers are the 5 surnames and 7 hopes. Everyone present was smart. Upon hearing this they instantly understood. Feng Zi wanted to use benefits to divide the 5 surnames and 7 hopes, but would the 5 surnames and 7 hopes be so easily fooled? They all looked at Zhang Feng, trying to find an answer from him. However, they saw Zhang Feng smile faintly. Looking at Li Shimin, you are the boss, your brain is good. Yes, that is my idea. Now I am providing all kinds of supplies to the 5 surnames and 7 hopes. There are silk, cotton padded clothes, food and other necessities. If I suddenly increase the supplies to one of them, think about it, what would the other families think? Chapter 2008. Li Shimin narrowed his eyes and thought for a while before saying, if it's just the beginning, it shouldn't have any effect. At most they'll just come and ask. But if it goes on for a long time, it will inevitably cause that young master's dissatisfaction. That's right. Zhang Feng nodded, took a sip of tea and said, let them be dissatisfied. At the beginning there may not be any effect, but after a long time, they will definitely come to question me. Speaking of this, he sneered, and I will avoid meeting them and not reveal any information. If they can't get any information from me, they will suspect that person. In this way, won't the conflict between the 2 sides arise? That's right. The corners of Li Shimin's mouth rose. Obviously he was very satisfied with this plan. But soon he seemed to have thought of something and his expression changed. There is a conflict, but the people of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes are not stupid. They will not shed all pretense of cordiality because of such a small matter. After all, their businesses are still very big. This is nothing at all. Zhang Feng nodded and said with a dignified expression, you are right. The 5 surnames and 7 hopes are not fools. They will not be so easily fooled. That's why I just said to give them benefits first. First, give them more goods, give them as much as they want. Once they taste the sweetness, then suddenly reduce one of them. This will cause them to have a conflict. Moreover, not only this but also use other methods to break up their forces. What methods? Li Shimin asked subconsciously. Rumors. Zhang Feng sneered. The 5 surnames and 7 hopes seem to love each other like a family, but secretly, who can guarantee that they are not scheming against each other? That makes sense. Li Yuan's eyes were half narrowed, and he stroked his sparse beard. Because Feng Zi's words just happened to speak to the bottom of his heart. Indeed, the 5 surnames and 7 hopes were usually very harmonious, but secretly they did not do little shady business. Although it was said that they supported each other and loved each other, every time when it came to dividing huge benefits, they would often see through the facade. However, this was often a quarrel between the younger generation of the clan. Finally, when it came to decision-making, the people in power in the clan would come forward, and in the end, it would end with a smile, thus dividing the benefits. Therefore, it was not an exaggeration to say that he was the one who understood the 5 surnames and 7 hopes the most. But soon he thought of another point. Even if there were huge benefits, the people who would be in conflict were usually some of the younger generation. The older generation's leaders were still very clear-sighted. Generally, they would not be so impulsive. It was hard to say whether Feng Zi's plan would succeed. Thinking about this, he looked deeply at Zhang Feng and said faintly, "Feng Zi, you are right. Usually there will be some conflicts between the big clans, but the people in power are not blind. They are not that easy to fool. Do you have 100% confidence in this plan?" "There's a 100% chance that it won't work out, but..." Zhang Feng narrowed his eyes, obviously pondering over Li Yuan's words earlier. Indeed, those who are able to wield authority in the clan are all dragons and phoenixes among men. How could they be so easily fooled? Just as he was thinking, he suddenly had an idea and hurriedly said, "Those people in power do have some brains, but they probably didn't think that they would be tricked by themselves, right?" "What do you mean? Do you have people with 5 surnames and 7 looks?" Li Shimin's eyes widened as he hurriedly said. "No, no, no." Zhang Feng waved his hand and shook his head with a smile. As the saying goes, 1,000-mile dike can be destroyed by an ant's nest. Don't look at how these hedonistic sons usually have nothing to do, but they are the first line of defense of the 5 surnames and 7 looks, and also the most important line of defense. As long as we take them down first, then it will be much more convenient. What do you mean? You want to deal with the hedonistic sons of the 5 surnames and 7 looks first? Li Shimin looked at Zhang Feng, somewhat in disbelief. Because in his opinion, since Feng Zi wants to take action from the population and industry, then what's the use of dealing with hedonistic sons? But unexpectedly, Zhang Feng did not care at all and smiled. "That's right, I just said, we have to take action from the population and industry first. The breakthrough of population is those hedonistic sons, because they are the younger generation of the 5 surnames and 7 looks. The inheritance of the 5 surnames and 7 looks is basically on them. If we can instigate 1 or 2 of them, then for us, it is still very effective." Hearing up to here, Li Shimin finally understood. So this kid is planning to instigate 1 or 2 hedonistic sons of the 5 surnames and 7 looks. But how could it be so easy? Those fellows are all arrogant and instigate them? He looked at Zhang Feng with a puzzled expression. "I'm afraid it's not that easy. Moreover, what can hedonistic sons do?" "Then you're wrong." Zhang Feng smiled, looked at Li Shimin and said, "Instigation is not easy, but hedonistic sons are very useful. Think about it, to be able to become hedonistic sons, most of them have a certain status in the clan. Since they have a status, then they have good resources, manpower and so on. If we can rope them in, we can get the latest information as soon as possible. This way we won't be flustered before things happen." Li Shimin nodded and smiled bitterly. "That's true, but how are you going to instigate them?" Chapter 2009. He knew that foppish people were called foppish because they were different from ordinary people. Bullying the common people and staying in brothels were common occurrences for them. Feng Zi wanted to instigate a rebellion? Wasn't it as difficult as ascending to the heavens? Just like Qing Chumo, Zhang Sun, and Chong Chong, weren't they all famous foppish people in Chang'an? Just by looking at what they did, one would know what a foppish person was. Zhang Feng naturally understood, but he didn't seem to care. He smiled and said, "I know what you're talking about. To foppish people, you either cater to their interests or subdue them. These 2 methods are the best." As he spoke, he glanced at Qing Yaojin. "Don't you think so, old Qin?" Qing Yaojin was drinking tea. When he was called, he almost spat it out. This was because he could hear that this kid was implying something. He was talking about foppish people and now he was talking about Lao Tzu? Wasn't this clearly saying that Tai Nyo was a foppish person? This kid was too much of a jerk. If His Majesty wasn't here, he would definitely spank him. Thinking about it, he didn't dare to make a move. He could only smile and say, "Yes, yes, yes." Zhang Feng smiled, then looked at Li Shimin and said solemnly, "Actually, it's not difficult to deal with foppish people. The two methods I just said can be used. As long as you master them well, it'll be fine. But obviously we can't use them now. We'll talk about it when we get to Jiangnan." Hearing this, Li Shimin understood that Fengzi still hadn't given up on Jiangnan. He could only persuade him, "Fengzi, now that you have a plan to deal with the 5 families and 7 hopes, and yours life is not in danger, it's better to delay things in Jiangnan." As he spoke, he gave Yu Qigong a look. The latter immediately understood and said, "That's right. I'll take care of you, or if he has any problems, come and find me. Right now, you should be thinking about how to deal with the 5 surnames and 7 hopes." Zhang Feng lowered his head and didn't say anything. In fact, there was a moment when he really wanted to rush out of the door and go to Jiangnan to find Yuer. However, everyone's words were like a warning bell ringing in his ears. Indeed, the 5 surnames and 7 hopes were like a hungry wolf hiding in the dark night. As long as they weren't eliminated, they could jump out at any time and bite you. Seeing Fengzi deep in thought, Yu Shinan knew he was wavering. He hurriedly said, "Fengzi, they are right. Although I do not agree with you dealing with the 5 families and 7 hopes, now that things have come to this, you cannot immediately go to Jiangnan. Otherwise, it is very likely that you will not return. Furthermore, since you have already decided on a plan, you should begin to implement it." "Not bad." Li Shimin nodded and hurriedly urged, "Fengzi, since the plan has already been decided, should we begin to implement it?" Zhang Feng didn't reply because he was doing a great struggle in his heart. On the one hand, he wanted to go to Jiangnan to find Yuer. On the other hand, he wanted to immediately implement the plan. He was wavering between the two. Find Yuer or deal with the Jiangnan clan. According to Lao Yu, Yuer was not in any danger in Jiangnan. It shouldn't be a problem if he didn't go now. However, the plan had already been decided. If he didn't implement it, it would be a pity. After a while, he seemed to have made a decision. He looked at Yu Qigong and said, "Lao Yu, are you sure Yuer is not in danger in Jiangnan?" Yu Qigong paused. He glanced at Li Shimin and then swept his gaze over everyone present. Only then did he reply, "Yes, Yuer is indeed not in danger. Fengzi, if you are worried, how about I send some more people over?" Li Shimin looked at Zhang Feng and was a little worried. He wasn't worried about Yuer. He was worried that Fengzi would be impulsive and fall into the trap of the Jiangnan clan. Zhang Feng looked deeply at Li Shimin before replying, "Okay, send more people." He now understood that the Jiangnan clans were luring him out. If he really went out now, he would fall into their trap. At that time, he wouldn't even know how he died, let alone find Yuer. It was better to implement the plan first. Li Shimin also saw through Zhang Feng's thoughts. He smiled and said, "It's good that you can think like this. Implement the plan first and weaken the power of the clans. It won't be too late for you to go then." "No." Zhang Feng immediately interrupted him. With a serious expression, he said, "At the latest, I will leave after the new year." Now that Jiangnan was in danger, it was already the limit for him to agree to stay for a while. It was impossible for him to wait until later. Li Shimin saw that Zhang Feng was so determined and knew that he couldn't force him. After all, it had already happened once before. He couldn't say anything more. He could only compromise and say, Okay, whatever you say. Can we implement the plan now?" Zhang Feng nodded and said with a gloomy expression, "Yes, it should be implemented. Lao Li, go find Lord Zhang's son and tell him about the marriage restriction order." "What about the restriction of supplies you mentioned?" Li Shimin asked without thinking. "Naturally, this will be implemented together." Zhang Feng's eyes turned. After a while he said, "I will do this. You don't have to worry about it." Chapter 2010. Li Shimin nodded and did not ask any more questions. He believed in Fengzi. As long as Fengzi was involved, there was nothing that could not be done. He was not worried about Fengzi's safety. Instead, he was thinking about the marriage restriction order. At that time he, Zhang Sun Wuji, Wei Zheng, and the others had discussed for a long time without coming to a conclusion. He did not expect Fengzi to point it out in a few words. He was a little embarrassed. However, he still admired Fengzi's strategy. Although it was a little vicious, it still solved the immediate problem. He looked at Zhang Feng and said seriously, "Since there is nothing else, I will go back and prepare to see Lord Zhang's son." As he spoke, he had already stood up. Zhang Feng saw this and quickly stood up as well. "Okay, you can go back first." He knew that the matter of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes was of the utmost importance. Naturally, he would not keep Lao Li and the others. After sending Li Shimin and the others off, Yu Shinan also stood up. Feng Zi, I don't want to say much about this matter. Anyway, remember that no matter what happens, your teachers will support you. Also, don't forget about the academy's end-of-year meeting. You should prepare the teaching materials. Zhang Feng nodded and cupped his hands with a serious expression. Teachers, rest assured. This student will not forget. Yu Shinan nodded slightly and waved his sleeves. Chu Suiliang and the others did not say anything. They all looked at him and left. The old scholar patted Zhang Feng's shoulder and said with a smile, "Kid, don't worry. Just do it." Zhang Feng nodded and bowed to the old scholar. He knew how much the old scholar valued him and would not let him down. He smiled and said, "Thank you, teacher." The old scholar smiled and turned to leave. Zhang Feng looked at the backs of his teachers and couldn't help but feel a little sad. In fact, part of the reason he was going to Jiangnan this time was to get rid of his teachers. It was like a child growing up and always having someone to take care of him. His teachers were good to him, but always taking care of him like this made him feel a little repulsed in his heart. However, he did not expect that his teachers would also support him in dealing with the 5 surnames and 7 hopes. This was a good thing and also made him feel much more relieved. He returned to his seat and took out a cigarette. He slowly lit it up and took a deep puff, feeling the stimulation of the cigarette. Since he was already prepared, there was no turning back. As he thought about it, he shouted at the door, "Old Du, come in." As soon as he finished speaking, Du Ziding trotted in. However, Zhang Yuyao and Jing Shu were behind her. Both of them had tear stains in the corner of their eyes, as if they had just cried. Before Zhang Feng could speak, Zhang Yuyao rushed over and said with a crying voice, "Young master, I heard that you are going to Jiangnan?" She and Jing Shu had just heard from Du Ziding that there were people from Jiangnan, so they went to ask. As a result, they heard that they were Jia Doran's men and that Yu Yuer was in danger. Immediately, the 2 girls were shocked because they knew that if something happened to Yu Yuer, Prince Zhang would definitely go to Jiangnan. Of course, they did not want to stop Prince Zhang from going to Jiangnan, but they were worried that Prince Zhang would be in danger or leave them behind. Therefore, the 2 girls eavesdropped outside the door for a while. They did not come in until Zhang Feng called Du Ziding. Zhang Feng naturally knew nothing about this. Seeing Zhang Yuyao like this, he thought that she had been bullied by someone. He comforted her and said, "What's wrong? Did someone bully you?" "No one bullied me." Zhang Yuyao slowly raised her head and said with a sad face, "Then why are you crying?" Zhang Feng was a little confused. Since no one bullied her, why would she cry? Zhang Yuyao slowly stood up and looked at Zhang Feng with tears in her eyes. "Prince Zhang, I heard that you were going to Jiangnan?" Hearing this, Zhang Feng instantly understood that it was because of this. He turned his eyes and stared at Du Ziding. It must be this old guy who said it. Otherwise, how could the 2 girls know? Being stared at like this, Du Ziding felt a little guilty. The 2 ladies knew that it was indeed related to him, but they wanted to go. He was also helpless. Looking at Du Ziding's aggrieved eyes, Zhang Feng did not intend to pursue the matter. After all, paper could not wrap fire. The 2 girls would know sooner or later. He had to choose to confess. "Yes, I am going to Jiangnan, but not now. You don't have to be like this." Hearing this, the mood of the 2 girls was a little better. Jing Shu stepped forward and said, "Young master, when are you going to leave?" "After the new year." Zhang Feng glanced at the 2 girls and his face was a little bad. "I still have a lot of things to deal with now. I can't leave for a while." Jing Shu turned to look at Zhang Yuyao. The 2 girls exchanged a look, then looked at Zhang Feng and said, "Young master, can you take us with you when you go?" Zhang Feng did not immediately answer because he was a little hesitant. He did not want to take the 2 girls. If he said it now, it would definitely make them sad. But if he took them with him, it would be very dangerous in Jiangnan. If he went, it would not be easy to protect the 2 girls. Chapter 2011. However, he had promised the 2 girls before. If he said that he didn't bring them along now, he would feel that he was going back on his word. Jing Shu seemed to have seen through Zhang Feng's difficulties and said with a pleading look, "Young master, can you bring us along?" "Yes, young master." Zhang Yuyao also went forward to plead. She didn't care if Prince Zhang was looking for you, or she only cared that Prince Zhang didn't abandon her. Zhang Feng was a little helpless. He was worried about the danger if he brought the 2 girls along, but he felt sorry for them if he didn't bring them along. Just as he was hesitating, a guard passed by the door. He instantly had an idea. These guards used to be soldiers. If he brought them along, they might be fine. Even if there was danger, they should be able to stand on their own. If he trained the guards according to the training methods of the special forces in the future, coupled with the resources of the forge, they might become a special force. Thinking of this, he looked at the two girls. I can bring you along, okay? The two girls were overjoyed and almost jumped up. They hurriedly said, Thank you, young master. With that, Jingshu pulled Zhang Yuyao out of the door. We won't disturb young master anymore. We'll leave first. Since Prince Zhang had already agreed, there was no need to stay any longer to avoid angering the young master. Moreover, the young master seemed to have something to say to the butler. Sure enough, after the two girls left, Zhang Feng looked at Du Ziding with a gloomy face. Old Du, did you tell them that I was going to Jiangnan? Du Ziding's face immediately fell. He hurriedly explained, Master, it wasn't me. They saw Huan Yan and guessed it themselves. Enough. Zhang Feng waved his hand and didn't intend to pursue the matter. Instead, he looked at Du Ziding with a serious face. Old Du, how is the situation with the Jiangnan clans and the 5 clans and 7 hopes buying from us these few days? These words seemed to have touched Du Ziding's heart. He raised his head and smiled like a Maitreya Buddha. Master, to tell you the truth, those clans are all buying from us. They want a lot every day. Now the supply is a little short of supply. Not only that, they want us to give them a little more every day. All right. Zhang Feng was overjoyed, but a trace of coldness flashed in his eyes as he sneered, From tomorrow onwards, give them 10% more every day and 20% more the day after tomorrow, no less. Du Ziding was a little confused. Didn't Master hate the Jiangnan clan and the people of the 5 surnames and 7 hopes? Furthermore, there was quite a bit of enmity between them. Even if they had business dealings, they were very careful and gave them the least amount. Why would they increase the amount of goods this time? This was a little illogical. Thinking about it, he asked with a puzzled expression, Master, didn't you hate those clans the most in the past? He had also given very little goods, so why did he suddenly want to increase it? At this point he suddenly realized that he had said too much, so he stopped and looked at the old master. However, when he thought about how the old master wanted to increase the contact between the clan and the clan, he was extremely anxious in his heart. He looked like he wanted to say something but hesitated, which made people very angry. From the words just now, Zhang Feng already knew what the butler meant, but the plan had already been set, so he naturally would not give up. He said with a resolute face, Old Du, I know what you mean. You are just worried that the clan will become bigger. Don't worry about this. If you want a person to die, you must first make them crazy. This time I will make them crazy first, you just need to do as I say. Du Ziding frowned slightly. Although he could not understand Master's thoughts, he deeply knew that as long as Master was right and most importantly Master had a grudge with the clan, he could not let him go. After thinking about it, he nodded and said, Yes, Master. Then I will go and inform them now. With that, he turned around and prepared to leave. Wait. Zhang Feng waved his hand to stop Du Ziding and said with a serious face, Right now, how many guards are there in the manor? Du Ziding's eyes rolled as if he was thinking about something. After a while, he said, There are 55 guards, 20 or so servant girls, 10 or so people in the kitchen and some old women. Okay, I told you to say the guards, not the number. Zhang Feng unhappily interrupted Du Ziding. He glanced at the empty space outside the door and said, Immediately go and gather all the guards in the manor in the courtyard. I have something to announce. Although Du Ziding did not know what Zhang Feng was planning, he still nodded and left. Zhang Feng took out a cigarette from his waist, lit it and followed the footsteps out. He stood in the courtyard, feeling the cold wind of the cold day. At this time there was no more snow, but he still felt as if his face had been scraped by snowflakes, dry and cold and painful. He looked in the direction of Jiangnan, inhaling the cigarette, allowing the cigarette to stimulate his body, and gradually sank into his memories. I hope nothing happens to you in Jiangnan. If something happens to you, I will definitely not let the clan of Jiangnan go. I will definitely come to Jiangnan to find you. Wait for me. After this period of time passes, the clan will definitely become powder under my feet. Chapter 2012. Just as he was thinking, a shout pulled him back to reality. Master! Zhang Feng glanced behind him and saw that many guards had already gathered. He casually threw away the cigarette butt and sorted out his emotions. He suddenly turned around and said with a straight face, Everyone is here. Seeing their master's expression change, the guards seemed to know that something big had happened. They all became serious, lined up and said in unison, Yes, master. Zhang Feng glanced around and nodded slightly, Don't be nervous. I'm just announcing something. From today onwards, everyone will put down their work and accept my training every day. Training? What training? The guards whispered to each other with a puzzled look. For them, Working in the Zhang mansion was undoubtedly to protect their master and earn some money to settle down. They had never thought about training. Although they were retired soldiers, they had not trained for many years and had long been used to this lazy life. Now that their master suddenly said this, they were indeed not used to it. Zhang Feng naturally knew the doubts of the guards. He waved his hand to signal them to be quiet and then said, "Everyone must be puzzled. Since you are all guards, why should I let you train?" As he spoke, he looked in the direction of Jiangnan and his face became gloomy, "Because I will be going to Jiangnan in a few days. I hope that you can go there and help me. Can you understand?" Jiangnan? Master is going to Jiangnan? Why is Master going to Jiangnan? It should be related to the perfume we talked about last time, right? The people standing there were all the trusted subordinates of the Zhang mansion. When Jiangnan was mentioned, they naturally thought of the perfume because they all knew about the dried flowers. Thinking of this, they could understand and kept cheering. "Master, we support you. Master said that the perfume is a treasure. If that's the case, we must go to Jiangnan with Master." Hearing the cheers of the crowd, Zhang Feng nodded slightly and then his face turned cold. "Good. In that case, let's start training. First, form a circle and run 50 laps around the courtyard." Hearing this, the guards felt guilty. Although they were retired veterans, they hadn't trained for a long time. Suddenly running 50 laps, their bodies might not be able to take it. But when they thought of helping their master in the future, they gritted their teeth and slowly ran in a circle. Zhang Feng stood at the periphery and glanced at the crowd. He said in a cold voice, "Today is just the beginning. From tomorrow onwards, you will need to run 5 laps around Chang and city every morning, do 200 push-ups at noon, and then practice archery in the courtyard. At night, you will take turns to use the Shao Mountain gun." They felt that the whole day had been arranged so clearly that there was no time for rest. Although they didn't understand what push-ups were, when they heard that they had to run 5 laps around Chang and city every day, they felt their legs go weak. That was Chang and city at least 20 kilometers. If they ran 5 laps, it would be 100 kilometers. They didn't need to run. Just hearing it was scary enough. What push-ups were there? He still wanted to practice archery? Practice the Shao Mountain gun? Their legs were a little weak. Just when they were about to plead with their master, Zhang Feng's voice sounded again. "Whoever can persist to the end today will be the leader of this team. You don't have to worry about not getting paid for training every day. In the future, as long as you participate in the training, you will get a bonus on top of your original salary every day." As soon as these words came out, the crowd was as if they had been injected with chicken blood. Their eyes turned red and even their running speed increased a lot. They weren't greedy for money, but they felt that the sound of money seemed to make their blood boil. Why did they want to be a soldier in the first place? Wasn't it for the title and money? Since they couldn't get the title, they could only get money. Besides, many of them had family members. If they had more money, they could undoubtedly let their family members live a better life. For a moment, they seemed to see their family members eating and drinking well. Zhang Feng was naturally happy to see this scene. He lit another cigarette and slowly smoked. Before he took 2 puffs, he saw Du Ziding come over. He looked at the guards running in the yard with a puzzled face and unconsciously walked to Zhang Feng's side. "Oh master, it's done. The guards are... Old Du, you came at the right time." Zhang Feng took out the cigarette butt and pointed to the guards. "Record it. In the future, these guards will have to run 5 laps around Chang and city every morning with sandbags tied to their legs and steel on their backs. At noon, they will do 200 push-ups, and then they will practice archery in the yard. At night, they will take turns to go to Shao Mountain and train with guns. Also, add a bonus on top of their original salary. They must eat the best food, at least meat for every meal," and, as he spoke, he turned to look at Du Ziding, only to see that Du Ziding's eyes were as big as chestnuts and his mouth was so big that an egg could be put in. He scolded him angrily, "Old Du, why are you in a daze?" Chapter 2013. "Oh, Master, Du Ziding looked at Zhang Feng absent-mindedly and stammered, "Master, you just said that you want them to run 5 laps around Chang and city with sandbags tied to their legs and steel plates on their backs every day? Do 200 push-ups at noon? By the way, what is push-ups? And practice archery? Aren't you afraid that these guys will be crippled?" "They won't." Zhang Feng waved his hand and said seriously, "I have arranged everything. This kind of systematic training will not only not cripple them, but also make their bodies stronger. You don't have to worry about this. You just need to help me supervise them every day." Indeed, he used the training method of special forces in the future. This kind of training was very high intensity, and ordinary people could not accept it at all. But for these people who had been soldiers, it was more acceptable. Even if they were not used to it at first, they would slowly accept it. But Du Ziding did not know. He originally thought that the master's method was a bit too powerful, and the guards could not accept it. Hearing this, he was relieved and said faintly, "Master, what you said is reasonable." Zhang Feng took a deep puff of the cigarette and said faintly, "You ask someone to prepare some meat and some hot water. Let these guys eat after they finish running." Du Ziding took a deep look at the wailing guards. For a moment he was actually envious of these fellows. Not only did the old master treat them well, he even added a bonus to their original wages. This was simply a gift from the heavens. He even wanted to join in. But when he thought of the high-intensity training he had to face every day, his legs couldn't help but tremble. He could only accept the order and leave quietly. "Hurry up for Lao Tzu. Don't dawdle." Zhang Feng glanced at the few guards who were lagging behind and scolded them harshly. He was determined to turn these guys into special forces. Now, they had not even run 2 laps and they were already starting to lose their horses? How could he not be angry? The guards who were lagging behind seemed to know that the master was scolding them. They looked at Zhang Feng bitterly and quickly wiped the sweat on their foreheads. They kept their long tongues and continued to catch up with the runners in front of them. The yard echoed with the guards panting. Their foreheads were sweating like beans and kept pouring down until it fell on their clothes, shoes, and even their feet. Soon the ground under their feet was wet. The sweat mixed with the fragrance of the soil, emitting a special smell. Zhang Feng's hawk-like eyes looked around at the crowd and kept shouting, 1-2-1-2-1. In the future this will be your slogan. Every time you run you must shout it. Your footsteps must follow the slogan. Start shouting now, 1-2. Everyone was already half dead. How could they still have the strength to shout such a nonsense slogan? They stuck out their tongues and their eyes were a little blurred as if they were about to faint. Zhang Feng saw that no one reacted and was immediately furious. He was about to reprimand them but unexpectedly someone shouted, 1-2-1-2-1. He looked in the direction of the voice and saw a burly man who was running in front wiping the sweat on his forehead. He kept shouting as if he was using all his strength to shout. It was rough and loud. This person, Zhang Feng was faintly influenced. He remembered that this person was often guarding the door, but he could not remember his name. He would have to ask later. Thinking about it, he looked deeply at the burly man and was about to say something to boost their morale. Unexpectedly, a series of chaotic howls sounded, 1-2-1-2-1. The voices were made by all the guards. They were already half dead from exhaustion and did not have the strength to shout any slogans. But with the first person starting, it was different. It was as if a ball of fire was ignited in their bodies and they had no choice but to explode. Indeed, Zhang Feng's slogan had a basis, and it had a very strong attachment. As long as the first person took the lead, the people behind him would be infected, and all of them would involuntarily roar. This was equivalent to throwing a spark on a prairie. Originally, the flame was not very big, but it would gradually spread to the surroundings, and in an instant the fire would become bigger. A single spark could start a prairie fire, and this was the most appropriate way to describe these guards. They did not even know how to open their mouths when their strength was about to be exhausted. In any case, since there was the first person, they would follow and shout. Gradually, their voices became more and more orderly and even louder. 1-2, 1-2, 1. Waves of resounding and loud voices spread throughout the Zhang residence. The servant girls with sharp ears seemed to have heard something and screamed. They pulled their companions and gathered around. In a short moment, the courtyard was filled with servant girls watching. Wow, this is that Ningxiao. His good friend is manly. Look, he is running in front. If you want to say he is manly, you have to look at Kang Shuang. Look at the bulging muscles all over his body. You can see it even through his clothes. Especially that master who is drenched in sweat. Wow, I can't take it anymore. Help me. Chapter 2014. Look, the 2 guys you just said were manly are about to be overtaken. Who is that? Qinggang. He's about to take the first place. Wow, I declare that Qinggang will be my idol from now on. Look at his muscles, tut tut tut. A large group of maids stood by the old pagoda tree and watched the guards. They pointed at them from time to time and kept commenting on the most manly guard in their hearts. Occasionally, when the guard turned his head, the maids immediately blushed and covered their faces with the handkerchiefs they had prepared, but they were unwilling to leave. It seemed that these maids had been prepared for this. They were a group of fujoshis. Fortunately, the Tang Dynasty was open-minded and women had some freedom. In addition, this was the Zhang mansion. Otherwise, a great scholar would have come and scolded them harshly, which was a disgrace to the educated. Not only these maids, but the guards' roars also attracted Zhang Yuyao and Jingshu. However, they were not like the maids. Instead, they went to Zhang Feng and glared at Zhang Feng, as if to say that he only knew how to make trouble all day. Although they were a little angry in their hearts, their eyes were still focused on the guards. From time to time they used handkerchiefs to cover their shyness. After all, such a scene was very rare, especially in this era. It was as difficult as climbing to the sky to see such a scene. On the other hand, when these guards saw that many maids were watching, they instantly seemed to have taken stimulants. Their faces turned red and their eyes popped out. One by one they rushed to be the first, for fear that they would be looked down upon by the maids if they fell behind. There were even a few guys who rolled up their sleeves and deliberately showed their muscles as they ran. Immediately, the maids screamed again and again, and their pretty faces were almost bleeding. Especially those who were running in front. They were already sweating a lot and their clothes should have long been soaked. If you want to get wet, then so be it. Why did you have to deliberately tear your clothes and let out wolf howls? It was as if you were deliberately showing off your muscles. However, to be honest, these guys who tore their clothes did have good figures. In any case, they used to be soldiers. Their muscles were glossy under the contrast of their sweat. Seeing this scene, a few more servant girls couldn't help but scream. They deliberately used their handkerchiefs to cover their faces. When the guards weren't paying attention, they secretly took away their handkerchiefs to take a look. It was as if this could give them great satisfaction. Zhang Feng was a little stunned. He did not expect that the appearance of these maids could stimulate the potential of these guys. Just now they were half dead, shouting slogans as if they wanted to kill them. Now, when the maids appeared, each one of them was more powerful than if they had taken stimulants. Even the guy who was at the back of the team ran to the front, faintly overtaking the guy who was running in the first place. This was something he did not expect. However, it seemed that there were some benefits. At least it could stimulate the hormones in these guys' bodies, thus stimulating their interest in training. They would not have to train with a bitter face, otherwise it would be boring. Thinking of this, he looked at the time. It was almost evening. Then he looked around at the crowd and shouted, "Now there are 3 laps left. Whoever runs in the first place will be the leader of this team in the future." As soon as these words came out, some people were happy and some were sad. The happy guards thought that they originally still had a few laps left and wanted to show off their muscles in front of this group of infatuated maids. Now that the master suddenly said that there were 3 laps left, they could not show off their muscles. They could not help but feel a little depressed. However, after thinking about it, it seemed that it was not bad to be the leader if they ran first. Besides, there were maids here watching, so they could not drop the ball. Those who were sad were the guys who fell behind. Just now, they only cared about showing off their muscles in front of the infatuated maids. Now, they did not even know where they were falling behind. How could they win the first place? Everyone had different thoughts, but one thing had not changed, and that was to win the first place. Every man had a competitive heart, not to mention that they used to be soldiers. Their competitive hearts were more serious than ordinary people, especially now that there was a large group of infatuated maids beside them. This greatly stimulated the primitive power in their bodies. Their faces were red, the veins on their necks and foreheads were bulging, and their eyes were as big as chestnuts. They kept shouting as if they were cheering themselves on. "Go get the first place. I want to be the leader. I can't let the maids see it clearly. Go." With a burst of shouting, everyone kept moving their legs, wishing that they could cross the finish line in one step. The maids at the side also seemed to be infected. They kept screaming and waving the handkerchiefs in their hands, cheering for the men they believed in. "Come on, get the first place. He Quan, go." The screams spread throughout the entire Zhang mansion and also into the ears of the guards. They instantly felt that the strength they had lost was restored. Their eyes were bloodshot, emitting a bloodthirsty light. They stared at the finish line and kept running as if they did not feel tired at all. Chapter 2015. Zhang Feng smiled. He was very happy to see this scene. It wasn't that he liked to torture these guys, but he felt that he had found the point where these guys would explode, and that was these servant girls. Just a moment ago, these half-dead people were like dead dogs, but when these servant girls appeared, each one of them seemed to have been injected with chicken blood. Each one was braver than the other. Wasn't this the point where these guys would explode? Admittedly, the servant girls were the point where the guards would explode, but they didn't have any malicious thoughts in their hearts. Everything was caused by their pride and competitiveness. The appearance of the servant girls greatly stimulated their competitiveness and pride, which made them display a more courageous side than before. However, although this was a good thing in a sense, these guys wouldn't drop the ball at a crucial time in the future, right? Thinking about it, if there was any danger, these guys wouldn't only save the woman and not the man, right? It was a little scary just thinking about it. He had to find a chance to change these guys' bad habits. He couldn't let a woman scream and not stop the car. If that happened, it would be terrible. Just as he was thinking, a series of howls sounded. Zhang Feng's heart jumped. Could it be that something had happened? He suddenly turned around and saw a burly man half kneeling on the ground with both hands covering his face. He seemed to be crying but also seemed to be laughing. In any case, it was the kind of half-crying, half-laughing appearance. This person. It seemed to be the He Quan that the servant girls had called out. But why was this guy crying? His face darkened and he strode forward. Are you called He Quan? Why the F***ck are you crying? There are no cowards in the Zhang residence. If you lose, you lose. If you cry again, get out of Lao Tzu's house. The man named He Quan slowly raised his head when he heard this. The moment he saw Zhang Feng, he laughed again but didn't say a word. He only cared about wiping the hot tears on his face. This made Zhang Feng's mind go blank. Why the F***ck are you talking? Are you dead? He Quan hurriedly nodded, still smiling. Old master, didn't you just get first place? What's there to be proud of? He glared at He Quan and then looked at Zhang Feng. Master, this old man suddenly sped up when I wasn't paying attention and overtook me. I was supposed to be in first place. Master, please approve. I want to fight him one-on-one. Hearing this, Zhang Feng finally understood. He Quan had gotten first place and this burly man had gotten second place. He was unhappy and wanted to settle the score now. It was laughable. They were all members of the Zhang family, and yet they still wanted to fight until their faces were red. If word of this got out, where would Lao Tzu put his face? However, he still had to ask about the dispute of the first place. He turned to look at He Quan and said seriously, He Quan, did you sneak away when this guy wasn't paying attention? No. He Quan's face flushed red, feeling as if he had been wronged. He tried his best to explain, Master, when Song Tai was running just now, he looked at the servant girl and even showed off his muscles. He Quan, you're bullshitting. Song Tai's face was red and his eyes bulged. He reached out his hand and was about to hit He Quan. Fortunately, the guard beside him had quick reflexes and pulled him back, preventing him from being hit. However, he was still unhappy. He waved his hands and shouted, Lao Tzu didn't look at the servant girl. At the side, Zhang Feng felt that his ears were about to explode. Just as he was about to stop him, he felt his cheeks burning as if he was being stared at. He turned his head slowly and saw Zhang Yuyao and Jing Shu looking at him with resentment. It was as if they were saying, Look at your guard, you only know how to look at the servant girl. Zhang Feng instantly felt that his face had been completely thrown away by these fellows. He touched his blushing cheeks, turned his head and deliberately coughed lightly. He was somewhat unable to stand still because he knew that if he didn't stop them, these fellows would definitely tear down the Zhang residence. Moreover, the way the two girls looked at him was somewhat strange. He hurriedly scolded in a stern voice, all right, all of you stop. The two of them finally stopped after he finished speaking. However, their eyes were still filled with dissatisfaction. They glared at each other as if they wanted to eat each other alive. Song Tai, did you look at the servant girl or not? Zhang Feng looked at Song Tai with a serious face and asked. This. Song Tai's face was red and he stuttered. Seeing this, Zhang Feng finally understood that this guy was peeking at the servant girl. Just now he refused to admit it, but now he couldn't say a word. He even wanted to compete with He Quan for the first place. He snorted, Song Tai, you lost the competition because you peeked at the servant girl. What else do you have to say now? Song Tai didn't dare to look at Zhang Feng. He lowered his head and glanced at the servant girls under the old pagoda tree. These servant girls were originally here to watch the fun. When they heard that the master had something to do with them, their hearts were beating fast. When Song Tai looked at them like this, their hearts almost jumped out. They all covered their faces with their handkerchiefs and ran away. Hey, don't look anymore. You scared them away. Chapter 2016. When Zhang Feng saw Song Tai's posture, he knew that this guy was up to no good, so he quickly scolded him. The latter scratched his head and stared at Song Tai angrily before saying, You made a mistake just now. Otherwise you would have been the first. But you also worked hard. How about this? I'll give you the second place. From now on you will be under He Quan. After that, Zhang Feng turned to look at He Quan and said with a serious face, From now on, you will be their leader. You will take orders from me directly. Song Tai will be the second leader. You two should not have any more disputes. He Quan originally wanted to be the first. Now that he heard that he was the first, there was nothing to say. As for the dispute between him and Song Tai, it was caused by a moment of dissatisfaction. He usually worked in Zhang Mansion, so how could there be any grudges? He quickly nodded and said, "Thank you, master." Although Song Tai was dissatisfied in his heart, he had to accept this established fact. He said with a sad face, "Thank you, master." Zhang Mansion nodded with satisfaction and looked at the two of them. "Don't let me find out what happened today in the future. Since you are in Zhang Mansion, you must love each other. If you can't do this, you can get out of here." After that, he looked around at the crowd and said with a serious face, "From tomorrow onwards, you must get up at 5 o'clock. Then, with sandbags tied to your legs and steel on your backs, you must run 5 laps around Chang'an City. When you come back, do 200 push-ups. Get up at 5 o'clock. My God, isn't it too early? Yes, it's not even dawn at that time." Before he could finish his sentence, the guards howled in unison. Although they just knew the terrible news, no one expected that they would have to get up at 5 o'clock. At that time it was not even dawn. How could they go out for a run? Even Zhang Yuyao, who was standing at the side, was a little puzzled. What if he ran into danger? She hurriedly advised, "Young Master Zhang, isn't it a little too early?" The moment these words were spoken, all the guards looked at Zhang Yuyao in a different light. In the past it was respect, but now it was gratitude. This mistress was really good. She knew how to worry about the guards. In contrast, Mistress Jing Shu stood to the side without saying a word or pleading for mercy. In fact, it was not that Jing Shu did not want to plead on behalf of the guards, but she could understand Prince Zhang. This time, Prince Zhang was going to Jiangnan, so he naturally had to bring some subordinates. He was worried about bringing others, so he could only bring the guards. That was why he strengthened the training to ensure that everyone could be trained into an elite soldier. Although she could not understand Prince Zhang's training methods, she would not say anything. After all, if she interjected at this time, wouldn't that be questioning Prince Zhang? She wasn't that stupid. It was good that Zhang Yuyao was worried about the guards, but in Zhang Feng's eyes she was meddling in other people's business. However, it was not good to say anything in public. He could only explain seriously, as the saying goes, the best plan of the day is in the morning. Although it is still early, it is the best time of day to train. As he spoke, he turned his head to look at the guards and his face darkened. "You fellows are used to lazing around in the Zhang residence. Although you used to be soldiers, how many of you still retain the bravery of a soldier? This time, not only do I want to stimulate your courage, I also want to make you into a sharp blade that kills without spilling blood. I have already made the plan. If you want to be a coward, a softy, or a coward, you can say it now. I will not force you. Those who withdraw from the plan can still work in Zhang Manor." Indeed, in the past, these people had been among the top men in the military camp, and the famous Guanzhong men. But once they came out of the military camp, they became lazy. Even if they were not like normal people, they likely had thrown their previous training to the back of their minds. This time he wanted to stimulate these people's courage on the battlefield. Clearly these words seemed to be effective. The guards seemed to have been poked at their sore spot. Their recovered eyes bulged again and the tendons on their necks bulged again. Because of what old master had just said, none of them wanted to be a coward, a softy, or a coward. Normal people from Guangzhong would not be able to bear these words, much less these people who had once been soldiers. At this time they seemed to feel their blood boiling. Their buried souls were waking up. "We are not cowards. We want to train, we want to be the strongest." The guards tacitly raised their right fists. Their eyes were red and they kept shouting. Zhang Feng smiled proudly because he saw what he wanted to see most. Although these guys just shouted a few times, he knew that this might be the key to open the depths of their souls. These guys were finally going to show their fiercest side. His face darkened. He looked around at the crowd and said sternly, "Very well. Since you want to be the strongest, then train according to my method. I promise that you will be reborn in a week and become the bravest warriors of the Tang Dynasty. Although you are retired soldiers, you are not bad at all. In my heart, you are the strongest." Chapter 2017. The strongest one, the strongest one. The eyes of the guards were red and the veins on their necks were clearly visible. This was a declaration that belonged to the retired soldiers. Their blood was boiling, and when they thought of the last words of their dead comrades, they felt as if they had endless energy in their bodies. Zhang Feng smiled with satisfaction and waved his hand to signal everyone to be quiet. "Well, I've told you the plan just now. I believe you are hungry, right? Old Du has prepared meat and bathwater for you. Go and take a bath." "Thank you, master." "Oh, take a bath?" Everyone cheered and their faces were full of excitement after the vow. They wiped the sweat on their bodies and walked to Du Ziding's residence. But at this time someone shouted, "Master, what is the push-up you just said?" This voice instantly attracted everyone's footsteps. They stopped and looked at Zhang Feng with a puzzled face. Yes, just now the master only said to do push-up, but he didn't say what it was. How could they do it? Even the two women looked at Zhang Feng with a puzzled face. They thought they were experienced and knowledgeable, but they really didn't understand what push-up was. Especially Jingshu, she had always made friends with high officials and nobles, but she had never heard of push-up. Seeing the puzzled look on everyone's faces, Zhang Feng remembered the push-ups he mentioned before. He hadn't explained it clearly to everyone yet. He deliberately coughed twice and said, "Ahem. You guys watch carefully. I'll show you once." With that, he rolled up his sleeves and half knelt on the ground ready to start. Unexpectedly, Zhang Yuyao came up. She supported Zhang Feng and persuaded, "Young master, what are you doing? The ground is so dirty. Why are you kneeling on the ground?" She was very puzzled. Prince Zhang said to do push-up. Why was he half kneeling on the ground? Wasn't he worried about his clothes getting dirty? "I'm fine. Don't worry. I'm going to show them." Zhang Feng smiled and waved his hand to indicate that he was fine. He knew that this little girl was worried about him, but he wasn't in any danger. Zhang Yuyao didn't believe it, but since Prince Zhang had said so, she didn't stop him. She turned to look at Jingshu, and the latter gave her a reassuring look. Only then did she stand aside quietly. Now that no one was stopping him, Zhang Feng could finally show off his skills. He lay on the ground and turned his head to glance at the guards. "All of you watch carefully. This is a push-up." The guards were puzzled at first, but when they saw their master's posture, they seemed to have understood something. They looked at each other and revealed a smile that all men understood. "That's right. Which man wouldn't know how to do that? I practice every night. It's not like it's that hard." Other than those who were not married yet, who didn't know how to do it. Wouldn't it be fine as long as he had hands? However, it didn't seem right for Master to do this in public, right? Moreover, he did it in front of the two matriarchs. It had to be said that Master was really fierce. At this moment, everyone worshipped Zhang Feng. Zhang Yuyao was puzzled. She didn't know what Prince Zhang's posture was, nor did she know why the guards were laughing. She could only turn to Jingshu and ask for help. "Jingshu Mimi, what is Prince Zhang's posture? Also, what are the guards laughing about?" "Sister?" Jingshu hurriedly tugged at Zhang Yuyao's sleeve, indicating that she should stop talking. She blushed and angrily glared at Zhang Feng, who was doing push-ups. Then she leaned over to Zhang Yuyao's ear and said, "That's there?" Before she finished listening, Zhang Yuyao felt her ears burning. After a while, her whole face turned red. She shyly glared at Zhang Feng and quickly pulled Jingshu away. Zhang Feng, who was doing push-ups, felt that something was wrong. He glanced in the direction of the two women, but found that the two women had left. He asked with a puzzled expression, "Hey, why did you two leave? I was about to show my perfect posture." Zhang Yuyao originally felt that this posture was strange. After hearing Jingshu's explanation, she naturally didn't want to bother with Zhang Feng. However, she felt the gaze behind her. Driven by curiosity, she secretly took a look. Instantly, her face turned red again. Why was Prince Zhang still in that posture? Wasn't it too unsightly? She angrily glared at Zhang Feng, took Jingshu's arm and walked to the boudoir. As for Jingshu, she didn't have any opinion at all. She just told Sister Yuyao what she knew. Thinking of Sister Yuyao's big reaction, she couldn't blame herself. Watching the two women leave, Zhang Feng was a little confused. He was just doing push-ups. Why were the two women looking at him with disgust? They even glared at him coquettishly? He didn't do anything to let them down, right? For a moment, he doubted life because he knew that the two women had always been very obedient by his side. Why did they suddenly change today? Everything happened too fast, right? Just as he was feeling puzzled, the guy next to him said in a lukewarm tone, "Master, you're quite amazing." Zhang Feng frowned and was a little confused. Chapter 2018. What did that mean? Why did it feel weird? It was as if there was a hidden meaning in those words. He turned his head and glanced at it, but he didn't know who said it. He could only ask, "Who said that just now? What did it mean?" Everyone shook their heads, indicating that they didn't know. Indeed, with so many people standing there, no one knew who said it. However, Zhang Feng was getting more and more confused. He turned around and stood up abruptly. He looked at everyone with a puzzled expression. "Why did Yuyao and Jingshu leave just now? Also, why are you laughing so strangely?" Everyone was silent. They looked at each other and smiled in a way that all men understood. With this smile, Zhang Feng seemed to understand something, but he also didn't seem to understand it. Why were these guys smiling so wretchedly? And it was when he was doing push-ups? He raised his head and recalled the scene of him doing push-ups just now. Suddenly, he seemed to understand something and looked at everyone with a stunned expression. You guys, no wonder you looked at Lao Tzu so strangely. It turns out that you were thinking about that. Everyone tacitly understood and continued to laugh strangely. This angered Zhang Feng. He glared at everyone fiercely. Everyone 100 push-ups. Hurry up. The guards were a little confused. Wasn't the master fine just now? Why did he change his expression so suddenly? He even wanted them to do push-ups? It wasn't that these push-ups were bad, but they had never done them before. Moreover, this posture didn't seem too elegant, right? They were hesitating whether to do push-ups when Zhang Feng's voice sounded again. Didn't you hear what I said? Hurry up, 100 push-ups per person. This time, everyone didn't dare to hesitate because they realized that the master was really angry. They could only quickly lie on the ground and imitate Zhang Feng's posture just now. Although they weren't used to it at first, after 1 or 2 push-ups, they felt very comfortable, as if all the meridians in their bodies had been opened up. Yiquan looked at Zhang Feng excitedly and smiled. Master, your push-ups are amazing. Damn it, you still have the face to smile? Zhang Feng turned his head and glared at Yiquan. His eyes were about to spit fire. You bastard, make 200. You're not allowed to eat until you're done. Then, as if he was still angry, he turned his head and glared at Song Tai. And you bastard, were you just laughing at Lao Tzu? Song Tai was stunned. Just as he was about to explain that he didn't say anything, Na Qing thought of Zhang Feng's thunderous voice and said, make 200 of them too. If you don't finish them, you're not allowed to eat. In an instant, Song Tai felt that his life had fallen into a dark phase. He turned his head and glared at Yiquan. If it wasn't for this brat, he might not have been implicated. Yiquan felt Song Tai's burning gaze and turned his head to look at him. He could feel Song Tai's anger, but he was also a victim. He also felt wronged. He could only give Song Tai a comforting look. He didn't care whether Song Tai accepted it or not. With a bitter face he did push-ups. Zhang Feng, with his hands behind his back, glanced at everyone angrily. You guys actually dare to make fun of Lao Tzu? It seems that the training given to you is still too little. Tomorrow you'll run 3 more laps in Chang'an City. Hearing this, everyone's legs trembled. 3 more laps? That would be 8 laps. Wouldn't they be exhausted? Song Tai looked at Zhang Feng with a pleading face. Master, you can't run 8 laps when you wake up at 5 in the morning. Do you want more? Speak if you want, don't stop doing push-ups. Zhang Feng glared at Song Tai and raised his head. He seemed to be thinking about something. After a while, he revealed a malicious smile. You're right. I can't run 8 laps when I wake up at 5 in the morning. Hearing this, Song Tai was delighted. He thought to himself that there was hope. Everyone looked at Zhang Feng with a happy face. They wondered if they should reduce the number of laps. Just as they were daydreaming, Zhang Feng's face changed. His thunderous voice sounded again. If I can't run when I wake up at 5 in the morning, then I'll wake up at 5 in the morning. Anyway, I can't miss any of the 8 laps. As he spoke, he turned his head to look at Yiquan and Song Tai. He revealed a malicious smile. Yiquan, Song Tai, you two supervise. If there's 1 less lap, the 2 of you will run 10 laps each. Hearing this, Yiquan and Song Tai's hearts skipped a beat. Although they enjoyed the treatment of being a leader, they didn't expect the punishment to be so severe. However, thinking about it, when they were in the military camp, the treatment was worse than this. Master's punishment was considered good. After thinking about it, the 2 of them could only bite the bullet and reply, Yes, Master. Zhang Feng nodded. He turned around and glanced at everyone. With a serious face he said, Don't think that I'm bullying the weak by making you train. I'm doing this for your own good. At the same time, it's also for my own good. After you retired from the military camp, your muscles and bones have been lazy. This training is to let you pick up the pride of the past. Also, during the time when I go to Jiangnan in the future, I need you. Chapter 2019. These words could not be considered impassioned or even motivating, but in the ears of the guards, they became a declaration. Indeed, they had all been soldiers. After leaving the military camp, their lives were more or less lazy, but this was not what they wanted. The environment was like this and they had no choice. Now, since the old master was interested, how could they let him down? Which retired soldier did not want to return to their former glory? There was no one who did not want to, including them. Furthermore, in the future they would go to Jiangnan to protect the old master. Thinking of this, waves of energy seemed to burst forth from within their bodies. Thus, at this moment, their hearts seemed to resonate. Their eyes were red as they said in unison, Yes, old master. Zhang Feng nodded in satisfaction. He had finally managed to ignite the spirit of this group of people. This way he wouldn't have to chase after them and force them to train in the future. This was because he knew that the self-discipline of soldiers was very strong. As long as there was a good start, the next step would be a continuous cycle that couldn't be stopped. After the rising passion, Zhang Feng waved his hand to indicate for everyone to leave. After running for so long, this group of people had long been hungry. As expected, when they received the old master's order to disperse, these people were like hungry tigers hunting for food, heading straight for the kitchen. If it was not for the meat prepared for these people earlier, the kitchen would probably be in chaos. Zhang Feng actually liked to see this kind of scene because the more lively the guards were, the less dangerous it would be to go to Jiangnan in the future. This was undoubtedly a good thing. As for how much these people could eat, was this not a small matter? Could the Zhang mansion be eaten by these people? The weather in Guangzhou was like a baby face, changing quickly. The sun had just set in the west and in a short while it was dark. There was not much activity at night, so Zhang Feng burrowed into his blankets and did not care about anything. In any case, those people were managed by He Quan and Song Tai, so there should not be any problems. Furthermore, if there was a problem he would find those two people. The originally dry air soon became moist, and a large amount of fog rose up, covering this 1,000-year-old ancient capital with a mysterious veil. Of course, the Zhang residence was no exception. The entire residence seemed to be wrapped in fog. Except for the few bright lanterns, the entire residence seemed incomparably mysterious. The servant on night patrol paced back and forth in the manor with a lantern in his hand. His hands were raised and from time to time he would exhale a few breaths in an attempt to alleviate the bone-piercing cold. Squeaking sounds came from the ground. These were the leaves of the old locust tree that were blown down by the cold wind. Under the servant's feet, they were like bursts of music, crisp and melodious. Winter was originally a cold season, and the cold brought a lot of inconvenience to people. However, it also had a beautiful and lovely side, because it could temper people's willpower and make them more tenacious and indomitable. At this moment, the lights in the guard's room were already turned on, and the figures were getting ready to get out of bed. Most of them were still active. After all, the self-discipline of soldiers could not be underestimated. However, there were still a few guys who were unwilling to get up as if they were sealed in a blanket. This made He Quan's head hurt. He was originally the leader of this troop, and could be considered to be in charge of these fellows. Now that it was time for training, these fellows actually did not want to get up. This was simply not giving him any face. What was even more infuriating was that old master had previously instructed these fellows to still laze in bed. This was simply a slap to old master's face. He really could not hold it in any longer. He pointed at those fellows who were lazing in bed and scolded them to their faces. "You bastards, what a waste of old master giving you such good training resources. You actually dare to laze in bed? Do you want to die? Do you believe that Lao Tzu will end you right now? Mother Faster, hurry up and get up for Lao Tzu." The corner of Song Tai's mouth twitched when he heard this. He had never seen He Quan so angry before. Even when the two of them quarreled yesterday, it was not like this. It seemed that this fellow wanted to show off his might. No, he was still the second in command. He could not let this fellow gain the upper hand. As he thought about this, he glared at those fellows who were lazing in bed and started scolding, "You bastards, hurry up and get up for Lao Tzu, do you hear me?" As he spoke, he rolled up his sleeves and was ready to get started. This gave those fellows who were lazing in bed a huge fright. They originally wanted to laze in bed for a while and get up immediately. After all, they did not dare to disobey old master's orders. Moreover, they were also soldiers and this was common knowledge. Who would have thought that these two leaders would turn hostile and still want to get started? They could only hurriedly beg for mercy. "Get up immediately, get up immediately. Leaders, please don't be angry." As they spoke, everyone hurriedly got up from their beds. They quickly put on their clothes and stood in a row. It was unknown whether they were preparing to scold them or to admit their mistakes. Seeing this, He Quan smiled slightly. He secretly felt a burst of joy. He secretly praised himself for his might, but his face was stern. He swept his gaze across everyone and said in a thunderous voice, "You fellows, it seems that you are used to lazing around. It's the first day of training and you are already lazing in bed. Is it because old master is not here that you are slacking off?